The fluorescent lights flickered once, then died completely. In the sudden darkness of Redwood General Hospital's emergency room, Lena Moss stood frozen, her scrubs soaked through with rain and something darker, blood from the motorcycle accident victim she'd just stabilized in the ambulance bay. The attending physician, Dr. Marcus Hale, didn't even look at her as he ripped the security badge from her neck. "You're done here." Behind him, the automatic doors burst open, not with patients, with soldiers. Black helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights cutting through the storm like knives. A voice crackled over the PA system. "Military frequency, not hospital dispatch. We need Lena Moss, now." Hale's face went white, because the woman he'd just fired, the one he'd called replaceable 30 seconds ago, was the only person in 3 states who could save what was coming. "Before we go any further, I need you to do something. Follow this story all the way to the end. Like this video. Comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happened next changed everything, and nobody saw it coming. Lena had been invisible for 3 years. Not literally, though sometimes it felt that way. She moved through Redwood General like a shadow, anticipating needs before doctors barked orders, catching medication errors no one else noticed. Her hands steady when everyone else's shook. The other nurses called her the ghost because she appeared exactly when needed and vanished the moment she wasn't. Dr. Hale hated her for it. "Moss." His voice cut across the nurse's station at 6:47 a.m., 17 minutes before her shift officially started. She'd arrived early to restock the crash cart. Someone had used the last epinephrine kit and hadn't logged it. "My office. Now." The fluorescent tube above his desk buzzed like a dying wasp. Hale didn't offer her a chair. Behind him, through the window, downtown Millbrook sprawled gray and indifferent under October clouds. "I'm terminating your employment effective immediately." Lena's pulse didn't spike. It dropped. That cold, slow rhythm she'd learned in another life. The one that let you think clearly when everything turned to chaos. Why? You don't get to ask why. Hale's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "You questioned my orders in front of a patient's family yesterday, undermined my authority. The patient was allergic to penicillin. It was in his chart. You made me look incompetent. You were about to kill him." The words hung between them like a blade. Hale's face flushed purple. He was 43, Stanford Medical School, 5 years as chief of emergency medicine, and his ego couldn't survive being corrected by a nurse who'd never finished her bachelor's degree. "Get out," he said quietly. "Security will escort you." "I have 6 patients currently under—" "Not anymore." He pressed the intercom. "Security to administrative wing, now." The 2 guards who arrived looked uncomfortable. Tommy Chen had worked at Redwood General for 8 years. He'd seen Lena talk down violent patients, coach terrified residents through their first traumas, work 30-hour shifts when the flu wiped out half the staff. He wouldn't meet her eyes as he waited for her to gather her things. Her locker was almost empty. 1 extra pair of scrubs, a protein bar she'd forgotten about, a photo she kept meaning to remove. Her and her younger brother Danny at his high school graduation, both of them grinning before the car accident that killed him and shattered her world. "I'm sorry, Lena," Tommy muttered as they walked her toward the exit. She didn't respond. Through the ER's glass walls, she could see the organized chaos of morning rounds. Nurses she'd trained, doctors who relied on her without realizing it, a machine that would keep running until it couldn't. The rain hit her like a fist. October in Millbrook meant cold and wet, the kind that soaked through everything. Lena stood in the parking lot as her badge was deactivated remotely. She felt it happen, that small click of disconnection. Behind her, the hospital rose like a fortress, warm light spilling from its windows. She'd given this place everything. 3 years of double shifts, covering for incompetent staff, catching mistakes that would have ended up as obituaries. And Hale had erased her in 6 minutes. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Lena Moss?" The voice was male, clipped, with an accent she couldn't place. Not quite American, definitely not civilian. "Who is this?" "You need to get clear of the hospital, right now." "I don't—" "Helicopter inbound. 30 seconds. Move." The line went dead. Lena stood there, rain plastering her hair to her skull, trying to process what she'd just heard. A helicopter in Millbrook. They didn't have... The sound hit first, low and heavy, a rhythmic thunder that rattled her teeth. Then the searchlights, 2 of them, blazing through the storm from the north. Lena's body reacted before her mind caught up. She was moving, sprinting toward the retention pond at the edge of the parking lot, away from the landing zone she now realized the voice had been warning her about. The UH-60. Black Hawk dropped from the clouds like a predator. Side doors open, 4 figures in tactical gear already moving before the skids touched asphalt. The rotor wash turned the rain into needles. Behind her, the hospital's automatic doors burst open. Dr. Hale stood frozen in the entrance, his white coat whipping around him. He was staring at the helicopter with an expression Lena had never seen on his face before. Fear. One of the soldiers jogged toward the hospital entrance, then stopped. He turned, scanning the parking lot systematically until his eyes locked on Lena. He touched his radio and spoke into it. Then he started walking toward her. Lena Moss. Not a question. He was maybe 30, built like violence, with the kind of calm that only came from seeing terrible things and surviving them. His uniform had no insignia, no name tape, nothing that identified him beyond the fact that he was clearly military. "We need you to come with us." "I think you have the wrong person." "You're Lena Catherine Moss, date of birth April 14th, 1992. Former Army medic, call sign Nightingale, assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment from 2014 to 2017. 3 deployments, classified operations in Syria and Yemen, honorably discharged following..." "Stop." The word came out harder than she'd intended. "I don't do that anymore." "Ma'am, we have a code black situation 8 miles from here. Multiple casualties, surgical intervention required in the field, and you're the only qualified person within 50 miles. "I'm a nurse. Was a nurse. As of 20 minutes ago, I'm unemployed." "You're a lot more than a nurse." His eyes were gray, unblinking. "We know what you can do. We know what you've done. And right now there are people dying who don't have time for you to pretend you've forgotten." Behind him, Dr. Hale had found his voice. "What is going on? This is a hospital. You can't just land a military..." The soldier didn't even glance at him. "Sir, step back inside. This is federal jurisdiction." "Federal? I'm calling. Your compliance isn't required." The soldier's tone could have frozen nitrogen. Hale's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. The soldier turned back to Lena. "We're not asking, but I'd prefer to ask." Lena looked at him, then at the helicopter, then at the hospital where she'd tried so hard to become someone normal, someone forgettable, someone who didn't wake up at 3 a.m. with her hands shaking, remembering what it felt like to hold someone's heart in her palm while mortars screamed overhead. "What kind of casualties?" "Training accident, parachute malfunction during a halo insertion. 5 jumpers, 3 critical. One's bleeding out from a torn subclavian artery. We've got a field surgeon, but he's trapped under equipment. You're option 1. "What's option 2? "They die." The rain had soaked through to her skin. Lena could feel her old training trying to surface, that cold clarity she'd spent 3 years burying. She'd left the army specifically to avoid this. The impossible choices, the weight of lives balanced on a knife edge, the knowledge that one wrong move meant someone else's family got a folded flag. "I haven't done field trauma in 3 years. It's like riding a bike." "No," she said, "it's not." The soldier studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled out his phone and held it up. On the screen was a photo. Young man, maybe 22, dark hair, scared eyes. He was wearing the same tactical gear as the soldier in front of her. His name's Private First Class David Brennan. He's 19. He lied about his age to enlist after his father died. This is his first real operation. His mother thinks he's doing training exercises in Colorado. The soldier's voice didn't change, but something in his eyes did. "That torn subclavian? He's got maybe 30 minutes before he bleeds out. Maybe less. We can't fly him to a trauma center. Too much turbulence. He'd die in transit. Needs to be stabilized here, now, by someone who knows what they're doing." Lena looked at the photo. At the kid who'd lied to serve. At the mother who'd already lost a husband. Danny had been 19 when the drunk driver hit him. "Damn it!" She was already moving toward the helicopter. The soldier fell into step beside her. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." As they approached the Black Hawk, The other soldiers snapped to attention, not out of protocol, but recognition. One of them was holding a medical pack that looked military spec, and his face when he saw her was pure relief. "Nightingale," he breathed. "Holy hell, they actually found you." The name hit her like a bullet. She'd tried so hard to bury it, to become someone else. But here it was again. The call sign she'd earned in Syria when she'd kept a wounded ranger alive through a 12-hour firefight, working on him in complete darkness while enemy fire raked the building around them. The other rangers had started calling her Nightingale because she worked miracles in the dark, and the name stuck. "Where's the casualty?" 300 yards north in the industrial park. "We couldn't move him. He's pinned. Sergeant Hayes is keeping pressure on the wound, but stop talking and get me there." The moment she climbed into the helicopter, something shifted. Her body remembered things her mind had tried to forget: how to move in confined spaces, how to brace against turbulence, how to think in seconds instead of minutes. The crew chief handed her the medical pack without being asked, and she was already inventorying supplies before they lifted off. Hemostatic gauze, chest seals, pressure dressings, field surgical kit. It was organized exactly the way she used to organize her own gear, which meant someone had been paying attention. "Who requested me specifically?" she shouted over the rotor noise. The soldier who'd fetched her, she still didn't know his name, leaned close. "Colonel Vance. He was your CO in Yemen." Her stomach dropped. Vance. She hadn't heard that name in 3 years, and for good reason. He was the one who'd pulled her from the field after Danny died, who'd sat with her through the grief counseling, who'd known better than anyone that she couldn't do the job anymore. Not the way it needed to be done. "Vance doesn't do training exercises," she said. "No, he doesn't." Which meant this wasn't a training exercise. The helicopter banked hard. Below, the industrial park sprawled across 10 acres of warehouses and loading docks, most of them abandoned. In the center of an empty lot, she could see figures moving, soldiers forming a perimeter, and in the middle, something large and twisted that might have been equipment but looked more like wreckage. They were on the ground in seconds. Lena was moving before the skids fully settled, medical pack slung over her shoulder, rain hammering her face. The soldiers guided her through the perimeter without speaking. They knew better than to waste time on explanations when someone was bleeding out. The scene was worse than she'd imagined. The wreckage was a cargo drone, military grade, the kind used to drop supplies into hostile territory. Except this one had gone down wrong, and when it hit, it had caught 2 soldiers in its path. One of them was unconscious but breathing. The other one was Private Brennan, and he was pinned under a section of the drone's cargo bay, a piece of metal strut driven through his shoulder like a spear. Sergeant Hayes looked up when Lena arrived. His hands were slick with blood, and his face was the color of old concrete. "Thank Christ. I can't get the bleeding stopped. Every time I apply pressure, he screams, and his BP drops." Lena knelt beside him, her mind automatically cataloging details. Brennan was conscious but fading, his skin pale and clammy, his breathing rapid and shallow. Tachycardia, hypotension, classic hypovolemic shock. The metal strut had gone clean through his right shoulder, probably through the subclavian artery, and every heartbeat was pushing more blood into his chest cavity. "Brennan?" She leaned into his line of sight. "I'm Lena. I need you to stay with me, okay?" His eyes found hers, terrified. "Am I dying?" "Not today." The lie came automatically, smooth and certain, because that's what you did. You lied with confidence, and sometimes that confidence was enough to keep them fighting. "But I need you to trust me. This is going to hurt. It already hurts. It's going to hurt worse." She turned to Hayes. "I need that strut out. Now. But the second it moves, his chest cavity is going to flood. I'll have maybe 30 seconds to clamp the artery before he exsanguinates. Can you do it?" The question hung there. Could she? 3 years ago, yes. 3 years ago, she'd done it half a dozen times, working in blown-out buildings and desert compounds with nothing but a headlamp and her hands. But that was before Danny died, before she'd frozen during a critical procedure because the patient's eyes reminded her of her brother's, and a staff sergeant had died because her hands wouldn't stop shaking. That was why she'd left the Army. Why Vance had let her go without argument, because she couldn't be trusted anymore. The rain beat down. Private Brennan's breathing was getting shallower. Hayes was looking at her with something between hope and desperation, and all around them soldiers were watching, waiting, believing that Nightingale could pull off another miracle. Lena's hands were shaking. "I need more light," she said, "and someone find me a field surgeon, now." "Ma'am, there isn't time." "Then make time." The words came out harsher than she'd intended. She could feel her pulse hammering in her throat, could feel the weight of too many deaths pressing down on her shoulders. This was exactly what she'd been trying to escape. This impossible pressure, this certainty that someone would die because she wasn't good enough, fast enough, strong enough. A hand touched her shoulder. She looked up. The soldier who'd come to get her was standing there, his gray eyes steady. "Nightingale," he said quietly. "We didn't come for you because we were desperate. We came for you because you're the best. Colonel Vance said you could do this, so can you?" The shaking in her hands slowed. Lena looked at Brennan, 19 years old, lying in the mud with a piece of metal through his chest, dying because someone somewhere had made a mistake, and he'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just like Danny. Just like all of them. She couldn't save Danny. But maybe she could save this kid. "Get that strut ready to pull," she said. Her voice was steady now, cold. "On my count. Hayes, I need you on his legs. When I go in, he's going to thrash. Hold him still or we both die." She opened the medical pack and pulled out the field surgical kit. Scalpel. Hemostats. Clamps. Tools she'd used so many times her hands remembered the weight of them. She positioned herself at Brennan's right side, her left hand already finding the anatomical landmarks on his shoulder, clavicle, first rib, the pulsing warmth that meant artery. "Brennan, look at me." He did, barely. "You're going to pass out. That's okay. When you wake up, this'll be over, but I need you to stay still for the next 30 seconds. Can you do that?" "I don't want to die." "Then don't." She nodded to the soldiers on the strut. "On 3. 1. She didn't wait for 3. The moment they pulled, she moved. Her left hand plunged into the wound, fingers finding the torn artery by feel alone. She couldn't see anything through the blood, didn't need to. Her hands knew where it had to be. The hot pulse of arterial bleeding against her palm. She clamped down with her right hand, the hemostat finding the vessel on the second try. And then she was working blind, suturing the tear closed with thread she couldn't see while Brennan convulsed beneath her. 20 seconds. The bleeding slowed but didn't stop. Incomplete closure. She could feel the edges of the tear pulling apart, could feel the suture starting to fail, and there wasn't time to start over. She remembered something Vance had shown her in Yemen, a trick for when nothing else worked. Her hand found the hemostatic gauze. She packed it directly into the wound, forcing the clotting agent against the artery, and then she applied pressure, not with her hands, but with her entire body weight, driving down until she felt the bleeding stop. 30 seconds. 40. Brennan had stopped moving. Hayes was staring at her. The soldiers around them were frozen. "Check his pulse," Lena said. Hayes fumbled for Brennan's neck. His eyes went wide. "I've got it. Weak, but it's there." Lena kept pressure on the wound for another full minute, counting the seconds in her head, waiting for the hemostatic gauze to do its job. When she finally pulled back, the bleeding had stopped. Brennan was unconscious, but alive. She sat back in the mud, rain washing the blood from her hands, and felt the adrenaline drain out of her all at once. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. After 3 years of doubt, of wondering if she'd lost her edge, she'd reached into a dying man and pulled him back. The soldier with gray eyes was speaking into his radio. "Package secured. We need immediate medevac to Dover Trauma. Full surgical team standing by." Another helicopter was already inbound. Lena stood on shaking legs. Around her, soldiers were moving with renewed purpose, stabilizing Brennan for transport, securing the scene. But several of them paused to look at her, not with gratitude, but with something closer to awe. Hayes approached her, his face still pale but his eyes clear. "I've been doing this for 8 years, he said quietly. "I've never seen anyone work that fast." "You would have figured it out." "No." He shook his head. "I wouldn't have. He'd be dead." The medevac chopper touched down. A team of paramedics swarmed out, taking over Brennan's care with practiced efficiency. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, one of them glanced at Lena and did a double take. "You're Nightingale," he said. "From Syria." The name was spreading. Soldiers were staring now, whispering. Someone pulled out a phone. and Lena realized with a sinking feeling that her anonymity, the carefully constructed wall she'd built between her old life and her new one, was crumbling. The soldier with gray eyes appeared at her elbow. "We need to get you back." "Back where?" "Redwood General. Colonel Vance is inbound. He wants to debrief you personally." "I don't work for Vance anymore." "Ma'am, with respect, you just saved a soldier's life using field trauma techniques that are classified above my pay grade. The colonel's going to want to know where you learned some of that." Lena stared at him. "What do you mean, classified?" "That gauze packing technique, the pressure angle. That's not in any manual I've seen." Because it wasn't in any manual. It was something Vance had taught her during her last deployment, something experimental the Army was testing with their highest-level medics, and she'd just used it in front of 24 witnesses. "I need to go home," she said. "You don't have a home. Not anymore." The words hit harder than they should have, because he was right. She didn't have a job, didn't have an apartment she could afford without a paycheck, didn't have anything except a rapidly growing reputation she'd spent 3 years trying to bury. "Get me out of here," she said quietly. They flew her back to Redwood General in the same Black Hawk, but this time she wasn't alone. 4 soldiers accompanied her, all of them watching her like she might disappear if they looked away. The pilot kept the flight smooth, and Lena spent the entire trip staring out the window, watching Millbrook spread beneath her like a game board. When they landed on the hospital's helipad, she hadn't even known the hospital had a helipad until today, there was a crowd waiting. Dr. Hale stood at the front, flanked by hospital administrators and security. Behind them, what looked like the entire ER staff had gathered, staring at the military helicopter with expressions ranging from confusion to outright fear. But the person Lena noticed was standing apart from everyone else. Colonel Marcus Vance looked exactly the same as he had 3 years ago. Salt and pepper hair, ramrod posture, eyes that missed nothing. He was in full dress uniform, medals gleaming even in the gray morning light, and when Lena climbed out of the helicopter, he snapped a salute that made several soldiers around him immediately follow suit. "Welcome back, Nightingale," he said. The crowd went silent. Lena didn't salute back. She'd been discharged. She didn't owe the Army anything anymore. But Vance didn't lower his hand, and she realized with a creeping sense of dread that he wasn't saluting her as a former subordinate. He was saluting her as an equal. "Colonel," she said carefully, "what's going on?" "Walk with me." He turned without waiting for an answer, cutting through the crowd like a knife. Lena followed, aware of every eye tracking her movement. Hale looked like he'd been hit with a brick. The nurses she'd worked with were staring like they'd never seen her before. Vance led her to a conference room on the 3rd floor. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, which meant he'd been here before. Someone had set up a laptop and a secure communications line. When the door closed behind them, the noise of the hospital cut off completely. "Private Brennan's in surgery," Vance said without preamble. "They're saying he'll make a full recovery. You saved his life." "I did my job." "You did more than that." Vance opened the laptop and turned it toward her. On the screen was a video feed, footage from one of the soldiers' helmet cameras. It showed Lena working on Brennan, her hands moving with machine precision, her face utterly calm while everything around her was chaos. "You performed a field arterial repair that would have challenged most trauma surgeons in a fully equipped OR. You did it in the mud, in the rain, with minimal equipment, in under a minute. You taught me that technique. I taught you the theory. You made it work." Vance leaned against the table. "Lena, why were you working as a floor nurse in a civilian hospital?" "Because I left the Army." "You left because you thought you couldn't do the job anymore. After Danny." The name hung between them. Lena's jaw tightened. "I froze. A man died. A man died because his injuries were incompatible with life. You froze for 3 seconds. Your backup took over. He died because half his brain was missing, not because you hesitated." "I couldn't be sure of that." I could." Vance's voice was firm. "I reviewed every report, every witness statement. I spoke to every soldier in that unit. They all said the same thing. You did everything possible, and sometimes that's not enough. But you convinced yourself you'd failed, and you walked away from being the best combat medic the Army's had in 20 years. I'm not that person anymore. Today says otherwise." Lena looked at the frozen image on the laptop screen. Herself, covered in blood, eyes focused, hands steady. She barely recognized the woman in the video. "What do you want from me, Colonel?" "The situation today wasn't a training accident. It was a field test. We're developing new rapid deployment protocols for getting high-value medical personnel to crisis zones, and we needed to test the response time. You weren't supposed to be involved. We had a civilian trauma surgeon on standby. But when I heard you were in Millbrook, I made a call. You tested me. I gave you a chance to remember who you are." Vance closed the laptop. "Lena, the Army wants you back. Not as a medic, as an instructor. We're building a new program for advanced field trauma, training the next generation of Nightingales. I want you to run it." The offer sat there like a live grenade. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I'll freeze again. Because the next time someone's dying and I see my brother's face, I won't be able to do the job, and someone else will die because of me." "Then don't see your brother's face." Vance's tone was gentle but unyielding. "See David Brennan. See the 19-year-old kid who gets to go home to his mother because you decided to show up. See every soldier you could train, every life they could save, every family that doesn't have to bury someone they love." Lena closed her eyes. She could feel the weight of it, the responsibility, the risk, the certainty that sooner or later she'd fail again. But she could also feel something else. That cold clarity she'd experienced in the field, the sense of purpose that had been missing from her life for 3 years. "I need time to think." "You've got 24 hours. Vance pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on the table. "After that, the offer expires. And Lena, whatever you decide, what happened today proved something. You're not broken. You never were. You just needed to remember." He left. Lena stood alone in the conference room, staring at the business card. Outside, she could hear the muffled sounds of the hospital, alarms, voices, footsteps, the machinery of medicine grinding forward. She'd spent 3 years trying to be part of that machinery, and in one morning, she'd been ejected from it completely. But maybe that wasn't the end. Maybe it was a beginning. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. "Is this Lena Moss?" "Depends who's asking." "This is Channel 7 News. We heard you were involved in a military operation this morning. We'd like to interview you about—" She hung up. Then her phone buzzed again. And again, and again. Within minutes, she had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Someone had leaked the helmet camera footage. Someone had posted it online, and now everyone wanted a piece of Nightingale. The nurse who wasn't just a nurse, the woman who'd been hiding in plain sight for 3 years, the legend who'd come back from the dead. Lena turned off her phone. She walked out of the conference room and headed for the elevator. The hospital felt different now. Staff members stared openly, whispered to each other, pulled out phones to take photos. She heard her name mixed with words like hero and military and classified, and she realized her life in Millbrook was over. She could never go back to being invisible. The secret was out. On the ground floor, Dr. Hale was waiting by the exit. "Moss." His voice was tight. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." "I made a mistake this morning. I was hasty. If you're willing to come back, you fired me. I'm offering to reinstate you with a promotion, head nurse, better pay, better hours, full benefits." Lena looked at him, really looked at him. Hale's face was desperate, and she realized with a shock of understanding that he wasn't offering this because he valued her. He was offering it because keeping her would make him look good. Having a military hero on staff, someone who'd just saved a soldier's life on live camera, that was good publicity. That was leverage. She'd spent 3 years being invisible to this man. Now he wanted to use her visibility. "No," she said. "You're making a mistake. I've made a lot of those. This isn't one of them." She walked past him into the rain. Outside, the parking lot was chaos. News vans were pulling up, reporters spilling out with cameras and microphones. Someone shouted her name. Someone else was already running toward her. Lena broke into a jog, cutting between parked cars, heading for the street. A black SUV pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, and the soldier with gray eyes leaned out. "Need a ride?" She didn't hesitate. She climbed in. They drove in silence for 10 minutes, heading away from the hospital, away from the reporters, away from everything. The soldier didn't ask where she wanted to go. He seemed to understand she didn't have an answer. Finally, he spoke. For what it's worth, what you did today was extraordinary. I did what I was trained to do. Most people can't, even with the training. He glanced at her. I'm Captain Reed Shaw, by the way. I should have introduced myself earlier. Shaw. She studied his profile. You were with Vance in Afghanistan. 3 tours, he's mentioned you more than once. What did he say? That you were the best he'd ever seen, that you left too soon, that if he ever got a chance to bring you back, he'd move mountains to make it happen. Lena leaned her head against the window. I don't want to go back. Then don't. Shaw's tone was matter-of-fact. But don't pretend today didn't mean anything. You saved a life. That matters. One life? One life is everything. Ask David Brennan's mother. They drove for another 5 minutes. Then Shaw pulled over in a quiet neighborhood, tree-lined streets, modest houses, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors. He handed her a phone. Burner. Untraceable. Vance's number is the only one programmed. If you decide you want to talk, call him. If you decide you want to disappear, smash it and walk away. Either way, you get to choose. Lena took the phone. Why are you doing this? Because Vance was right. You're the best, and the Army needs people like you. Shaw's gray eyes were steady. But more than that, you need to know you're not broken. Today proved that. Whatever happens next, don't forget it. He drove away, leaving her standing on a sidewalk in a neighborhood she didn't recognize, holding a phone that represented a choice she wasn't ready to make. Lena started walking. She didn't know where she was going, didn't have a plan. But with each step, she felt something shifting inside her, a weight she'd been carrying for 3 years starting to lift. Maybe Shaw was right. Maybe she wasn't broken. Maybe Danny's death hadn't destroyed her ability to do the work. Maybe she just needed to remember what she was capable of. Her steps took her to a small park. There was a bench overlooking a pond, empty except for a few ducks. Lena sat down, the burner phone heavy in her pocket, and let herself think. She could call Vance, go back to the Army, train the next generation of combat medics, and maybe find some kind of redemption in teaching them to save lives the way she had. Or she could walk away. Find another hospital in another city, start over again, spend the rest of her life trying to be normal. Both options felt impossible, but as she sat there, watching the rain ripple across the pond, she remembered something Danny had told her the week before he died. They'd been arguing about her deployment. He'd wanted her to leave the Army, to stay home, to be safe. And she'd told him she couldn't because people needed her. Danny had smiled. You're not doing it because people need you. You're doing it because you need it. And that's okay. It's okay to need to be needed. Maybe he'd been right. Maybe she'd spent 3 years running from the work because she was afraid of failing. But today she hadn't failed. Today she'd been exactly what someone needed, exactly when they needed it, and a 19-year-old kid was alive because of her. That had to mean something. Lena pulled out the burner phone, stared at it. One call, one decision, one chance to step back into the life she'd left behind. Her finger hovered over the dial button. Then her real phone, the one she'd turned off earlier, buzzed in her other pocket. She'd gotten it back on somehow without realizing. There were hundreds of notifications now, but one message stood out from a number she didn't recognize. Your brother would be proud of what you did today. Don't waste it. The message had no signature, no follow-up, just those 11 words. Lena's hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from something else, recognition, maybe. Or permission. Or the simple acknowledgement that the person she'd been trying to forget was still inside her, still fighting, still capable of doing the impossible. She pressed dial. Vance answered on the first ring. I knew you'd call. I haven't decided anything yet. I know, but you called. That's enough. Lena took a breath. If I do this, if I come back, I need guarantees, no field deployments, no combat zones, just training, just teaching. Agreed. And if I freeze again, you won't. But if I do, then we'll deal with it, together, same way we dealt with everything else. The rain had stopped. Above her, the clouds were starting to break, thin sunlight filtering through. Lena looked down at the pond, at her reflection rippling in the water, and for the first time in 3 years, she recognized the woman staring back. I'll need 24 hours to get my affairs in order. Take 48. Vance's voice was calm. I'll have Shaw pick you up Tuesday morning. And Lena. Yeah? Welcome home, Nightingale. The line went dead. Lena sat on the bench for a long time after that, watching the ducks navigate the pond, feeling the weight of her decision settle into place. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even comfortable. But it was right, and that was enough. Behind her, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned, expecting Shaw or another soldier. Instead, she found herself face to face with a woman in a dark suit, flanked by two men in tactical gear that was definitely not U.S. military. Lena Moss. The woman's accent was clipped, Eastern European. We've been looking for you for a very long time. Lena's hand moved toward her waistband before she remembered she wasn't armed. Hadn't been for 3 years. The woman in the dark suit noticed the movement and smiled. Not friendly, more like a predator acknowledging prey that knew it was caught. Relax, the woman said. If we wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. The two men flanking her weren't moving, but their posture screamed military training. Not U.S., though, something different. Lena's mind cataloged details automatically. The cut of their jackets, the way they stood with weight forward, ready to move. Russian, maybe. Or Ukrainian. Who are you? My name is Katya Volkov. I represent certain interests who've taken notice of your talents. Volkov's English was perfect, but the accent bled through on certain consonants. That was quite a performance this morning. The internet is very impressed. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. You haven't heard the offer. Don't need to. Lena stood, calculating distances. The park was empty except for an elderly man walking his dog 50 yards away. The two operatives had positioned themselves to block both exits from the bench area. Professional. I'm going to walk away now. You're not going to follow me. Volkov laughed. It was a cold sound. You think you're in a position to dictate terms? We know everything about you, Lena. Every operation, every mission, including the ones that aren't in any official record. Lena went still. Yemen, March 2016. The compound outside Sana'a. You and your team were never there, according to the Pentagon. But we have satellite footage. We know what you did. We know who you saved. The memory hit like shrapnel. Yemen, the compound. The operation that had earned her the classified techniques Vance had taught her, the ones she'd used on Brennan this morning. She and 4 other medics had performed emergency surgery on a high-value target while under fire, keeping him alive long enough for extraction. The HVT had been a Saudi intelligence officer who'd been feeding the U.S. information about terrorist cells. His survival had prevented 3 major attacks. It was also completely off the books. How do you know about that? Because the man you saved works for us now. Volkov's smile widened. Small world, isn't it? He remembers the woman who pulled him back from the edge, described her hands as magic. When we saw the footage from this morning, we knew it was you. One of the operatives shifted his stance. Lena caught the movement. He was reaching for something in his jacket. Not a weapon, a phone. We have a proposition, Volkov continued. A job that requires your specific skill set. 3 days, full medical support, compensation that would make your army salary look like pocket change. All you have to do is no. You haven't heard the details. Don't need to. Lena's voice was flat. I know what people like you want. You want someone who can work off the grid, who can save lives without asking questions, who can be disappeared if things go wrong. I'm not that person. You were that person. In Yemen, in Syria, in a dozen other places your government won't acknowledge. Volkov took a step closer. Don't pretend you're some kind of humanitarian. You're a soldier who happens to have medical training, and soldiers follow orders. I don't follow your orders. The operative with the phone held it up. On the screen was a photo, grainy, clearly taken with a long-range lens. It showed Lena walking into her apartment building in Millbrook. The timestamp was from yesterday morning. We know where you live, Volkov said softly. We know you have no family left except a cousin in Boston who teaches high school. We know you're unemployed as of 8 hours ago. We know Colonel Vance just offered you a position you haven't accepted yet. We know everything, Lena, and we're offering you a choice. Work with us willingly, or we make your life very complicated. Lena's pulse was steady. That cold clarity settling over her again, the same focus she'd felt in the field. She wasn't afraid. She was calculating. 3 hostiles, Too armed, probably. Volkov might be armed too, but she carried herself like someone who let others do the violence. 50 yards to the nearest civilian. No cover between here and the park entrance. If this went bad, someone innocent could get hurt. "You're not going to threaten me in a public park," Lena said. "I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you an opportunity. By showing me pictures of my home and mentioning my cousin." Context. Volkov pocketed her phone. "We operate in a world where leverage matters. I wanted you to understand that we're serious. I understand you're desperate. Otherwise, you wouldn't be approaching me 12 hours after I became semi-famous on the internet. You'd have spent weeks building a relationship, establishing trust, making the recruitment feel natural." Lena crossed her arms. "But you don't have weeks. Whatever job you need done, it's happening soon. Which means you're running out of time and options." Volkov's smile faded. For just a second, something else showed through. Frustration, maybe, or respect. Hard to tell. "You're smarter than your files suggested." "My file's 3 years out of date." "Clearly." Volkov gestured to her operatives and they stepped back. Not far, but enough to create breathing room. "You're right, we're on a timeline. 72 hours from now, a cargo ship arrives in Norfolk with medical supplies destined for a conflict zone. Those supplies will never reach their destination because they'll be intercepted by people who plan to sell them on the black market. But hidden inside one of those shipments is something else, a prototype medication that could save thousands of lives. We need someone with your skills to extract it before the ship is raided." "Well, why not just tell the Coast Guard?" "Because half the Coast Guard is being paid to look the other way." Volkov's expression was grim. "And because the people who developed this medication want it to disappear. It's too effective, too cheap to manufacture. It would destroy their profit margins. So they've arranged for the shipment to be lost." Lena studied her. The story had the ring of truth, but that didn't mean anything. Good lies always mix truth with fiction. "Even if I believed you, I'm not a thief." "You're not stealing, you're saving." Volkov pulled out a tablet and brought up a document, clinical trial data, by the look of it. "This medication treats hemorrhagic fever. Mortality rate drops from 70% to 15% with early intervention. The company that developed it shelved the project because there's no profit in curing diseases that primarily affect poor countries. But one of their researchers smuggled out a batch. That's what's on the ship." Lena scanned the data. If it was legitimate, the medication was revolutionary. And if Volkov was telling the truth about it being suppressed, why me? You could hire any doctor. Because we need someone who can work under pressure, who won't panic if things go wrong, and who has the medical knowledge to verify what we're extracting. Your performance this morning proved you're still that person." Volkov's voice softened slightly. "I know what you did in Yemen wasn't just following orders. You saved that man because it was the right thing to do. This is the same choice." The hook was baited perfectly. Appeal to Lena's sense of justice. Make it about saving lives, not breaking laws. Classic recruitment technique. "I need time to think." "You have 12 hours. After that, we move to our backup plan." Volkov handed her a card, blank except for a phone number. "Call this number by midnight if you're in. Otherwise, we'll never contact you again." "And my cousin?" "Will continue teaching high school, completely unaware that any of this happened. We don't hurt innocent people, Lena. We're not monsters. We're just trying to do the right thing in a world that makes that very difficult." Volkov turned and walked away. Her operatives followed, and within 30 seconds, they disappeared into the tree line. Lena stood alone in the park, the blank card heavy in her hand. She should call Vance immediately. Report the contact. Let military intelligence handle it. But something stopped her. If Volkov was telling the truth about the medication, reporting this would bury it. The army would confiscate the data, file it away, and the medication would never see the light of day. Thousands of people would die who didn't have to. But if Volkov was lying, Lena would be walking into a trap. She pulled out the burner phone Shaw had given her. Vance's number was right there. One call. Instead, she pocketed both phones and started walking. 20 minutes later, she was at a public library 3 blocks from the park. The building was old but well-maintained, with rows of computers available for public use. Lena chose one in the corner, away from windows, and started searching. The medication Volkov had mentioned, she'd seen the name on the tablet. Virathex. It took 3 searches to find any reference to it, and when she did, It was buried in a withdrawn patent application from 8 months ago. The company that had filed it was a pharmaceutical giant with annual revenues in the billions. The patent application described exactly what Volkov had said, a treatment for hemorrhagic fever with unprecedented efficacy. But the status showed it had been voluntarily withdrawn. No explanation. Lena dug deeper. She found a research paper published by the lead scientist on the project. Dr. Sarah Ortiz, Stanford Medical School, 15 years of experience in infectious disease research. The paper had been published in a small medical journal 3 months ago, and it was a carefully worded warning about corporate suppression of vital medications. It never mentioned Virathex by name, but the implications were clear. Then she found Dr. Ortiz's obituary. Died 2 months ago. Car accident. Single vehicle collision on a clear day. No witnesses. Lena's stomach went cold. She kept searching. Found mentions of the cargo ship, the MV Patterson, scheduled to dock in Norfolk in 3 days. Its manifest was public record, listing medical supplies bound for relief efforts in South Sudan. Nothing unusual. But when she cross-referenced the shipping company, she found something interesting. It was a subsidiary of the same pharmaceutical giant that had developed Virathex. The pieces were starting to fit together, but not in a way that made her feel better. She was about to close the browser when someone sat down at the computer next to her. Captain Reed Shaw looked tired. His gray eyes were bloodshot, and he'd changed out of his tactical gear into civilian clothes, jeans, a leather jacket, the kind of outfit designed to blend in. He didn't look at her, just started typing on his own computer. "Vance sent me to check on you," he said quietly. "You didn't answer his calls." I needed to think. "About the Army offer, or about the woman who approached you in the park?" Lena's hands froze on the keyboard. Shaw glanced at her sideways, his expression unreadable. "We've been tracking you since you got off the phone with Vance. Standard security protocol for high-value personnel. When 3 unknowns approached you, we flagged it. I ran facial recognition on the woman." He pulled out his phone and showed her a screen. "Katya Volkov, former FSB, now freelance. Works for whoever pays best. She's been linked to arms deals, corporate espionage, and at least 2 political assassinations. Whatever she offered you, it's a lie." "How do you know what she offered?" "Because people like Volkov always offer the same thing, a chance to do good while breaking the law. It's textbook recruitment." Shaw's voice was calm but firm. "You need to tell me what she wanted." Lena closed the browser, looked at Shaw directly. "If I tell you, what happens?" "We investigate. If there's a legitimate threat, we handle it. If she was just testing you, we keep monitoring." "And the medication she mentioned? Virathex?" Shaw's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. "You know about it," Lena said. "I know the name came up in an intelligence briefing 3 months ago. Something about pharmaceutical industry corruption. But it wasn't relevant to our operations, so I didn't dig deeper." Shaw leaned back in his chair. "Why? What did Volkov tell you?" Lena made a decision, maybe the wrong one, but she couldn't shake the image of Dr. Ortiz's obituary, or the thought of a medication that could save thousands of lives disappearing into corporate greed. She said there's a shipment coming into Norfolk in 3 days. Virathex hidden inside medical supplies. She wants me to extract it before the ship gets raided. And you're considering it. "I'm considering whether she's telling the truth." Shaw was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood. "Come with me." "Where?" "Somewhere we can talk without being monitored." They walked 6 blocks to a diner that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 1970s. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor, a waitress who looked bored enough to sleep standing up. Shaw chose a booth in the back and ordered coffee for both of them without asking what Lena wanted. When the waitress was gone, he pulled out his phone and placed it face down on the table, gestured for Lena to do the same. She complied. "This conversation didn't happen," Shaw said. "Understood?" "Why?" "Because what I'm about to tell you could end my career." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "Virathex is real, the suppression is real, and the Army knows about it." Lena felt the ground shift beneath her. "What?" 6 months ago, one of our intelligence assets in the pharmaceutical industry reached out with information about a medication being shelved for profit reasons. We investigated. Found out everything Volkov just told you. The medication works. The company buried it. A researcher tried to smuggle out samples and ended up dead. So why didn't you do anything? Because we were ordered not to. The pharmaceutical company in question has deep ties to the Defense Department. They manufacture half the medications we use in military hospitals. If we moved against them, they threatened to cut supply lines. People would die. So the Pentagon made a call: save the soldiers we have now, or save hypothetical civilians later. That's insane. That's politics. Shaw's voice was bitter. I didn't agree with the decision. Neither did Vance, but we're soldiers. We follow orders. Until you don't. Shaw met her eyes. Until we don't. The implication hung between them. Shaw was telling her this for a reason. He was giving her information she could act on. Information that would make her a target if she used it. You want me to work with Volkov, Lena said slowly. I want you to do what you think is right. But if you decide to move forward, you need to understand the risks. Volkov's people will use you and discard you the moment you're no longer useful. The pharmaceutical company will come after you if they find out. And the Army, Shaw hesitated. The Army won't be able to protect you. Officially, we don't know anything about this. Unofficially, Vance and I will do what we can, but there are limits. Why are you telling me this? Because Vance was right. You're the best, and people like you don't come along often. Shaw's expression softened. And because 3 years ago you saved my life in Syria. I was part of the convoy you patched up after that IED hit. You probably don't remember. You treated 14 casualties that night, but I remember. You kept me talking while you worked, asked about my family, made me feel like I was going to be okay, even though I could see the blood. So I owe you this. A chance to make your own choice, with all the information. Lena did remember. Not Shaw specifically, but that night. The convoy. The desperate hours of working by flashlight while insurgents took pot shots at their position. She'd been running on autopilot, hands moving while her mind stayed detached. She remembered one soldier in particular, though. Young guy, maybe 25, shrapnel in his gut. He'd kept asking about his daughter, kept saying he had to make it home for her birthday. Did you make it home for her birthday? Lena asked. Shaw blinked, surprised. What? Your daughter, the one you told me about. Did you make it home? A slow smile spread across his face. Yeah, I did. She turned 6. We had a princess party. She made me wear a crown. He pulled out his wallet and showed her a photo. A little girl with dark hair and a huge grin sitting on Shaw's shoulders while he wore a plastic tiara. She's 8 now. Still makes me wear the crown every birthday. Lena looked at the photo and felt something crack inside her. This was what it was about. Not medals or recognition or glory, just making it home, just being there for the people who needed you. I'll think about it, she said. Think fast. Volkov's not the patient type. They finished their coffee in silence. When they left the diner, Shaw handed her his business card, a real one this time, with a personal cell number written on the back. If you need backup, call me. I can't send official help, but I know people who work off the books. They owe me favors. And if this goes wrong, then it goes wrong, but at least you'll know you tried. Shaw walked away, and Lena was alone again. She spent the next 3 hours walking through Millbrook, thinking. The city felt different now, smaller, like she'd outgrown it overnight. Every street corner reminded her of the person she'd been trying to become. Quiet. Forgettable. Safe. But safe meant watching thousands of people die because a corporation decided their lives weren't profitable enough. By 8 p.m., she'd made her decision. She found a payphone, one of the last remaining ones in the city, and dialed the number on Volkov's card. It rang twice. I was beginning to think you wouldn't call. Volkov's voice was smooth, satisfied. You're in. I have conditions. I'm listening. I verify the medication first. If it's not Virathex, the deal's off. I walk away clean. Agreed. And I don't work with anyone I don't trust. I choose my own backup. There was a pause. That's not how we typically operate. Those are my terms. Take them or find someone else. Another pause. Longer this time. Lena could hear voices in the background, muffled conversation. Volkov was conferring with someone. Fine, Volkov said finally, but your backup gets vetted by my team. We can't risk security breaches. Fair. We move in 48 hours. I'll send you an address tomorrow morning. Come alone. Bring whoever you want for backup, but they arrive separately. Volkov's tone shifted, became almost friendly. Welcome aboard, Lena. You're doing the right thing. The line went dead. Lena hung up and stood there for a moment, rain starting to fall again. She'd just agreed to work with a foreign operative, steal medication from a pharmaceutical company, and potentially violate about a dozen federal laws. Vance was going to kill her, assuming she lived long enough to face him. She walked back to her apartment, the one she wouldn't be able to afford much longer, and found someone waiting in the hallway outside her door. Not Volkov, not Shaw. Dr. Marcus Hale. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since this morning. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled, and there was a desperation in his eyes that made Lena's instincts scream danger. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't." "Please." The word came out strangled. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. Against her better judgment, Lena unlocked her door. Didn't invite him in, but didn't close the door in his face either. Hale took it as permission and followed her inside. Her apartment was sparse. She'd never bothered decorating, never put down roots. A couch she'd bought secondhand, a table with one chair, a kitchen she barely used. The walls were bare except for one photo, her and Danny, the same one from her locker. Hale looked around like he was seeing her for the first time. "You live like this?" "I live like someone who knew she wouldn't be staying." "Moss." "Lena, I made a mistake this morning, a terrible mistake, and I need you to understand why. You fired me because your ego couldn't handle being corrected. I understand perfectly." "No," Hale's voice cracked. "I fired you because I was terrified." That stopped her. Lena turned to look at him properly. Hale's hands were shaking. 3 years ago, I killed someone," he said quietly, "not intentionally. A medication error. I prescribed the wrong dosage, and a patient went into cardiac arrest. He died before we could revive him. The hospital covered it up, said it was an unavoidable complication. But I knew the truth, and I've been paranoid ever since, convinced that someone would find out, that someone would expose me. So you became a tyrant. So I became careful, obsessively careful, every decision questioned, every order scrutinized, and then you came along, and you were better than me. Faster. More intuitive. You caught mistakes I didn't see, and every time you corrected me, I remembered that patient, remembered that I'm not as good as I pretend to be." Hale sat down heavily on her couch, uninvited. "This morning, when you stopped me from giving that penicillin, I should have thanked you. Instead, I panicked, thought you were going to expose me, so I eliminated the threat. By firing me. By removing the person who made me confront my own incompetence." He looked up at her. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry. And I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to hear it." Well, Lena stood there, processing. She'd spent 3 years working for this man, being invisible, trying not to threaten his authority. And all along, he'd been terrified she'd discover his secret. "Did you come here to apologize or to ask me not to report you?" "Both." Hale's honesty was startling. "The hospital's already investigating what happened this morning. Apparently several nurses filed complaints about how you were terminated. If they dig deep enough, they'll find other things. The error from 3 years ago. Other mistakes I've made. My career is over either way. But I wanted you to know you were right about everything, and I'm sorry I couldn't see it until it was too late." He stood and walked toward the door, paused with his hand on the knob. "For what it's worth, what you did today was extraordinary. You're going to do great things, Lena, greater than anything you could have done at Redwood General." He opened the door. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Then he was gone. Lena stood in her empty apartment, feeling something she hadn't expected: pity. Hale wasn't a monster. He was just broken in different ways, and his fear had cost her a job, but maybe it had also freed her to become something more. She pulled out the burner phone and called Shaw. "I need that backup," she said when he answered. "People you trust, people who can handle themselves if things go bad." "How many?" 2, maybe 3. "I'll make some calls. When do you need them?" "Tomorrow night." "That's short notice." "It's all the notice I've got."
Shaw was quiet for a moment. You're really doing this? Yeah. Vance isn't going to be happy. Vance doesn't get a vote. Fair enough. She heard typing in the background. I'll have names for you by morning, but Lena, be careful. People like Volkov don't play by rules. If this goes wrong, you're on your own. I'm used to being on my own.
No, Shaw said gently. You just think you are. The next morning came too fast. Lena woke at 5 a.m. to find an encrypted message on the burner phone, an address in the industrial district, a time, 8 p.m., and a single word, come prepared. Shaw's message arrived an hour later. 3 names, 3 phone numbers, and brief descriptions. Marcus Webb, former Delta, explosives expert, currently working private security. Jenna Reeves, former Navy intelligence, logistics, and planning, teaches self-defense in Baltimore. Tom Kowalski, former Air Force pararescue, medic with field experience, now works search and rescue. Lena called them in order. Webb answered on the first ring, listened to her 30-second pitch, and said yes before she finished. Reeves took more convincing. She wanted details, contingencies, exit strategies. But eventually she agreed. Kowalski was the easiest. Shaw says you're Nightingale? I'm in. When and where? By noon, she had a team. By 3 p.m., she'd secured equipment, a van that Webb provided, medical supplies that Kowalski requisitioned from his SAR team, and tactical gear that Reeves borrowed from her self-defense studio. By 6 p.m., they were gathered in an abandoned warehouse 2 miles from the meeting point, running through the plan. We don't know what we're walking into, Lena said, spreading a map across a makeshift table. Volkov says it's a simple extraction. Board the ship, identify the medication, secure it, get out. But she's FSB trained. She's used to running complex operations with multiple contingencies. So we assume the worst, which is? Webb was built like a tank, with scarred knuckles and eyes that had seen too much. He was cleaning a handgun with practiced efficiency. Ambush, double cross. The medication doesn't exist. Take your pick. Optimistic, Reeves muttered. She was smaller than Lena expected, maybe 5'4", but she moved like coiled wire. So what's our play? Webb and I go in first. Reeves, you stay with the van, engine running, eyes on all exits. Kowalski, you're our backup medic. If things go bad, you extract us. No heroics. What about Volkov's team? Kowalski was younger than the others, maybe 30, with the kind of calm that came from pulling people out of disasters. She's not going in alone. We assume she's got at least 4 operators, maybe more. If shooting starts, we're outnumbered and outgunned. So we don't let it get to shooting. And if it does? Lena met his eyes. Then we run. This isn't worth dying for. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. If Virathex was real, if it could save thousands of lives, then maybe it was worth dying for. Just not worth getting her team killed for. At 7:30, they moved out. The industrial district was a graveyard of failed businesses and abandoned warehouses. The address Volkov had sent led them to a shipping facility on the water, chain-link fence, rusted gates, security cameras that probably hadn't worked in years. Lena went in alone, as instructed. Webb and Kowalski circled to flanking positions. Reeves stayed with the van, monitoring police scanners and tracking Lena's location via the GPS beacon sewn into her jacket. The facility was bigger than it looked from the outside. Rows of shipping containers stacked 3 high, narrow alleys between them, shadows that could hide anything. Lena moved carefully, one hand on the tactical knife Webb had given her. She found Volkov in the center of the yard, standing beside a black sedan. 2 operatives flanked her, the same ones from the park. They were armed this time, not even bothering to hide it. You're punctual, Volkov said. I appreciate that. Where's the ship? Docked 300 yards south. We board in 20 minutes. Volkov gestured to the sedan. But first we need to discuss payment. We discuss payment. You're paying me after verification. That was before you brought backup. Volkov's smile was sharp. Did you really think we wouldn't notice? Your friends are good, but our thermal imaging is better. 3 additional heat signatures, all carrying weapons. So let's renegotiate. Lena's pulse didn't spike. She'd expected this. What do you want? A gesture of good faith. Your backup leaves. Now. Or we walk away and you never see Virathex. My backup stays. Then we're done here. Volkov turned toward the sedan. Lena's mind raced. If Volkov walked away, the medication was lost. But if she sent her team away, she was vulnerable. Volkov could kill her the moment the extraction was complete. Unless... I'll make you a deal, Lena said. My backup stays, but they stay back. Out of sight. They're insurance. If I don't check in every 10 minutes, they call the Coast Guard and report this location. You get what you want, I get what I want, and nobody has to trust anybody. Volkov considered this. Then she laughed. You're learning. Fine, your backup stays. But if they interfere, if they even show themselves, the deal's off, and people start dying. Understood? Understood. They drove to the dock in silence. The MV Patterson loomed against the night sky, a massive cargo vessel, deck lights blazing, crew visible as shadows moving behind railings. It looked legitimate. Too legitimate. How are we boarding? Lena asked. We're not. Volkov gestured to a smaller boat tied to the dock. Inflatable raft with an outboard motor. The ship's crew thinks they're being inspected by customs. We're going in through the cargo hold. Quiet. Quick. No witnesses. The four of them climbed into the raft, Volkov, Lena, and the two operatives. The motor purred to life, and they cut across dark water toward the Patterson's hull. Lena's burner phone buzzed. Text from Webb. This smells wrong. Say the word and we pull you out. She didn't respond. They reached the ship's hull. One of the operatives produced a grappling hook and rope, scaled the side with practiced ease. Moments later, a rope ladder dropped down. Volkov gestured for Lena to climb first. The cargo hold was massive, floor-to-ceiling stacks of medical supplies, each pallet wrapped in plastic and labeled with destinations. South Sudan, Yemen, Somalia, places where people were dying from diseases that could be prevented with proper medication. Places where Virathex could save thousands. It's in container A-47, Volkov said, consulting a tablet. This way. They moved through the hold, weaving between containers. The ship creaked and groaned around them. Lena kept her hand on the knife, every sense on high alert. Container A-47 was near the back, marked with standard shipping labels. Nothing special. Volkov's operative cut the lock and pulled the door open. Inside were hundreds of boxes, small, unmarked, packed efficiently. Volkov pulled one out and opened it. Inside were vials. Clear liquid, each labeled with a serial number. Verify it, Volkov ordered. Lena took one of the vials, held it up to the light. The liquid was viscous, slightly amber-tinted. She pulled out a portable testing kit, something Kowalski had procured, and ran a quick analysis. The results came back in seconds. Virathex. Actual, real, life-saving Virathex. It's real, she breathed. Good. Volkov snapped her fingers. Load it up. All of it. The operatives moved fast, grabbing boxes and hauling them toward the ladder. Lena helped, her mind reeling. There had to be 500 doses here, maybe more. Enough to treat entire villages. Enough to change the trajectory of epidemics. They were halfway through loading when the lights came on. Floodlights. Blinding. Lena's hand flew up to shield her eyes, and in that moment of disorientation, she heard the distinctive sound of weapons being readied. Don't move. The voice was American, military. Lena's stomach dropped. Coast Guard. A dozen of them, rifles aimed, spreading out to cover all exits. And standing in the center of the group, wearing a Coast Guard jacket over his uniform, was Colonel Marcus Vance. Lena Moss, he said quietly. You're under arrest for attempted theft of controlled substances and conspiracy to commit federal crimes. Get on the ground. Now. Lena didn't move. Her hand stayed visible, away from the knife at her belt. Around her, Volkov's operatives had frozen mid-step, boxes of Virathex still in their arms. The math was simple. 12 Coast Guard weapons against 4 people. No cover. No exits that weren't blocked. Colonel, Lena said carefully, you need to hear me out. I need you on the ground. Vance's voice was ice. Last warning. Volkov moved first. Not toward the ground, toward Lena. You set us up, she hissed. You brought them here. I didn't, Shaw. Shut up. Volkov's hand went to her jacket. One of her operatives shifted, reaching for his weapon. Don't, Vance snapped. Hands visible. Now. The operative hesitated. That half-second of indecision was all it took. The Coast Guard operators adjusted their aim, laser sights painting red dots across chests. Volkov's face twisted with fury, but she raised her hand slowly. Her operatives followed. Lena's mind was racing. Vance had known she'd be here, known about the medication, known about everything, which meant either Shaw had betrayed her or someone else had been watching closer than she'd realized. Sir. One of the Coast Guard team, a lieutenant by the insignia on his collar, approached Vance. What do you want us to do with the cargo? Secure it, all of it. I want every box cataloged and loaded onto our transport. Wait, the word burst out of Lena before she could stop it. You can't confiscate that medication. People need it. People need a lot of things. Vance finally looked directly at her, and his expression was unreadable. Get on the ground, Lena. Don't make this worse. Worse? You're stealing medication that could save thousands of lives, and you're telling me I'm making it worse? I'm following orders, something you apparently forgot how to do. The accusation stung. Lena forced herself to breathe, to think through the rage building in her chest. Vance wasn't the enemy here. He was a soldier doing his job. But his job was wrong. She dropped to her knees, hands behind her head. Volkov and her operatives did the same, though the Russian woman's eyes promised murder. Coast Guard personnel moved in, zip-tying hands with practiced efficiency. Lena didn't resist. She was calculating. The burner phone was still in her pocket. They hadn't searched her yet. If she could get a message to Webb, maybe there was still a way to... Empty your pockets. The lieutenant was standing over her. Everything, on the floor. She complied. The phone, the knife, her wallet, the blank card Volkov had given her. The lieutenant bagged them methodically, then hauled her to her feet. Transport's inbound, someone reported. ETA 4 minutes. Vance nodded. He was watching the operatives load the Virathex onto Coast Guard pallets, his face carved from granite. This wasn't just a bust. This was an extraction, military precision applied to civilian law enforcement. Someone had ordered this operation from very high up. Colonel? Lena kept her voice low, meant only for Vance. Please, just listen for 30 seconds. I'm not interested in explanations. Then interest yourself in facts. That medication is Virathex. It treats hemorrhagic fever with a 15% mortality rate versus 70% without treatment. The pharmaceutical company that developed it buried the research because it's not profitable. Dr. Sarah Ortiz tried to blow the whistle and died in a convenient car accident. This cargo was supposed to disappear into a black market raid, but someone smuggled it onto the ship as a last resort to get it where it needs to go. Vance's jaw tightened. You're telling me you stole controlled pharmaceuticals because you thought you knew better than the system. I'm telling you the system is broken, and you know it. What I know is that you violated federal law, worked with a foreign operative, and compromised an ongoing military investigation. Vance stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. You were supposed to be better than this, Lena. I gave you a way out, a way back, and you threw it away for what? A conspiracy theory fed to you by FSB. It's not a conspiracy if it's true. And how do you know it's true? Because Volkov showed you some data? Because you want it to be true? Vance shook his head. You're not a detective. You're a medic, a damn good one. But this? He gestured at the cargo hold, the medication, the mess. This is beyond your scope. Lena met his eyes, saw the disappointment there, the frustration, but also something else, something that looked like doubt. Sir? The lieutenant approached again. We've got a problem. 3 additional individuals in defensive positions 200 yards east, armed. They're not engaging, but they've got clear sight lines to the ship. Vance's expression hardened. Your backup. They won't shoot, Lena said quickly. They're just insurance. If I don't check in, they were supposed to call authorities, that's all. That's all. Vance's laugh was bitter. You brought armed civilians into a federal operation. Do you have any idea how many laws you've broken in the past 6 hours? Fewer than the pharmaceutical companies break every day. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, the people with money get to decide who lives and dies, and everyone else just follows orders. The transport helicopter's rotor noise filled the cargo hold before Vance could respond. It landed on the ship's deck with a thud that rattled the containers. Coast Guard personnel began moving the secured Virathex pallets toward the ladder. "Load the suspects," Vance ordered. "Separate transports. I want statements from all of them before we process." "Sir, about the armed individuals, leave them. They haven't broken any laws yet. But get their identities. I want names and backgrounds within the hour." Lena was hauled toward the ladder. She tried to look back to see what was happening with the medication, but rough hands kept her moving, up the ladder, across the deck, toward the waiting helicopter. The rotors were deafening. The wind from them turned the rain into needles. She was shoved into a seat, harness buckled across her chest. An armed guard sat across from her, face obscured by a helmet. No chance of conversation. No chance of escape. Through the helicopter's window, she watched the Patterson's deck. The Virathex was being loaded into a second helicopter, a bigger transport, military markings. Vance stood beside it, speaking into a radio. Even from this distance, Lena could see the tension in his posture. He didn't want to do this. She was suddenly certain of it. He was following orders he disagreed with, confiscating medication he knew people needed, because that's what soldiers did. The helicopter lifted off. Below, the Patterson shrank to toy size, then disappeared entirely as they banked inland. Lena closed her eyes and tried to think through her options. She had none. They landed at a military installation she didn't recognize. No signs, no identifying markers, just fences and buildings that looked designed to be forgettable. She was processed like a criminal. Photos, fingerprints, medical check. The guard who did her intake was polite but firm. No questions answered, no phone calls permitted. Then they put her in a room and left her there. The room was small. Concrete walls, metal table, 2 chairs. Classic interrogation setup. A mirror on one wall that was obviously two-way glass. They wanted her to know she was being watched. Lena sat down and waited. An hour passed, then 2. She spent the time reviewing everything that had happened, looking for mistakes. There were too many to count. Trusting Volkov, bringing civilians into a federal situation, assuming she could operate outside the law without consequences. But the biggest mistake was simpler, believing that doing the right thing would be enough. The door opened. Captain Reed Shaw walked in, carrying 2 bottles of water. He set one in front of her, kept the other for himself, and sat down across the table. "They sent you to soften me up?" Lena asked. "They sent me because Vance is too pissed to be in the same room with you right now." Shaw opened his water, took a long drink. "Want to tell me what you were thinking?" "I was thinking I could save lives by breaking laws, by working around a system that protects profit over people." Lena leaned forward. "Shaw, you told me yourself, the Army knows about Virathex, knows it works, and you're doing nothing because pharmaceutical companies have leverage, so I did something. You worked with FSB. I worked with someone who had access to medication that needed to reach people dying of hemorrhagic fever. Volkov's not a humanitarian, Lena. She's a mercenary. Whatever she told you, she was using you." "I know." Lena's voice was quiet. "I knew from the start. But the medication was real. I verified it. And if letting her use me meant saving thousands of lives, then I was willing to be used." Shaw was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled something from his jacket, a tablet. He placed it on the table and turned it toward her. On the screen was a document, classified header, Department of Defense seal. "This is the report our intelligence asset filed 6 months ago about Virathex," Shaw said. "The one that got buried. Vance had me pull it from archived files, read it." Lena scanned the document. It confirmed everything: the medication's effectiveness, the pharmaceutical company's decision to shelve it, the financial motivations. But at the bottom was a section she hadn't expected. Additional findings. Virathex production requires rare compounds sourced from conflict zones. Pharmaceutical companies abandoned the project not only due to low profit margins, but also due to unstable supply chains and ethical concerns regarding supplier relationships. Independent production would require establishing new supply networks, likely involving actors hostile to U.S. interests. "What does this mean?" Lena asked. It means the medication works, but making more of it requires dealing with warlords and cartels. The pharmaceutical companies didn't want that blowback. And when the Pentagon found out, neither did we. So the solution is to let people die? The solution is to find a different medication, one that doesn't fund terrorism. Lena stared at the document. The ground was shifting again. She'd been so focused on the injustice of suppression that she hadn't considered the logistics. But even as she processed it, another thought emerged. The batch on that ship is already manufactured. The supply chain question doesn't apply to existing stock. Shaw nodded slowly. No, it doesn't. So why confiscate it? Why not let it reach the people who need it? Because officially, we don't know where it came from. Could be legitimate surplus. Could be counterfeit. Could be contaminated. Until it's tested and verified, it's a liability. I tested it. It's real. You tested one vial with a field kit. That's not enough for FDA approval. People are dying now. They don't have time for FDA approval. Shaw leaned back in his chair, studying her. You really believe that, don't you? That individual action can override institutional process. I believe that institutional process takes too long when people are bleeding out. That's the medic in you talking. First, do no harm. Save the life in front of you. Worry about paperwork later. Shaw's expression was complicated. But this isn't a battlefield, Lena. This is politics. And in politics, the paperwork is what keeps everything from turning to chaos. Politics is chaos pretending to be order. Maybe. But it's the chaos we've got. The door opened again. Vance walked in, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He dismissed Shaw with a gesture, waited until the door closed, then sat down across from Lena. Tell me about your team, he said. They're not part of this. They're armed civilians who inserted themselves into a federal operation. They're absolutely part of this. I hired them for security. They didn't know what the job was until tonight. That's a lie, and we both know it. Vance pulled out a folder, opened it to reveal surveillance photos. Webb, Reeves, Kowalski, all clearly identifiable. Marcus Webb, 42, former Delta, 3 disciplinary actions for excessive force. Jenna Reeves, 37, former Navy intelligence, left under suspicious circumstances related to unauthorized information sharing. Thomas Kowalski, 31, decorated pararescue, currently under investigation for equipment theft from his SAR unit. Lena's stomach sank. You're making them sound like criminals. I'm reading their files. These aren't Boy Scouts, Lena. These are people with questionable judgment and flexible morals. Just like Volkov. Just like you, apparently. They're good people trying to help. They're accomplices to federal crimes. Vance closed the folder. Here's where we are. You violated the Theft of Government Property Act, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and potentially the Espionage Act for working with a foreign intelligence operative. Your team is looking at weapons charges and conspiracy. Combined, you're all facing 20 to 30 years. The words landed like punches. 20 to 30 years. Lena had known there would be consequences, but hearing it spelled out made it real. Unless, Vance continued, unless what? Unless you cooperate. Give us everything you know about Volkov, how she contacted you, what she told you, who else is involved. Testify against her in federal court. In exchange, we reduce your charges to misdemeanor trespassing, 6 months probation. Your team walks free. And the Verathex gets destroyed. It's contaminated evidence in a federal investigation. You can't destroy it. I can, and I will. Vance's voice was final. That medication is leverage in a situation you don't understand. There are pharmaceutical companies, foreign governments, and militant groups all interested in getting their hands on it. Letting it disappear is the safest option for everyone. Except the people dying of hemorrhagic fever. They'll die anyway. Vance's tone was brutal. That's the reality you're not accepting. Even if we released the medication, even if we got it to the right people, there's not enough.
500 doses? There are tens of thousands of people infected right now across 6 countries. You'd be choosing who lives and who dies. Is that really better than choosing no one? The logic was airtight. Vance had thought this through from every angle. But Lena could see the crack in his argument, the place where institutional thinking failed to account for individual lives. 500 people is better than 0 people.
But 500 people creates political chaos when the other 49,500 don't get doses. Governments fall over that kind of disparity. Then make more. With what? The rare compounds I just told you about? The supply chains that fund terrorism? Vance slammed his hand on the table. You're not thinking this through. You saw a problem, you saw a solution, and you decided you were the hero who could fix it. But real problems don't have clean solutions. They have trade-offs. And sometimes the trade-off is that people die because the alternative is worse. Lena absorbed the impact of his words. She wanted to argue, wanted to find the flaw in his logic. But part of her recognized the truth in what he was saying. She had been acting like a hero in a story, where doing the right thing always worked out. What happens to Volkov? She asked. She's FSB. We'll trade her back to Russia through diplomatic channels. She'll be someone else's problem. And the pharmaceutical company is not your concern. They killed Dr. Ortiz. They suppressed life-saving medication for profit. That's murder. That's business. And proving murder takes evidence we don't have. Vance stood. You've got 2 hours to decide. Cooperate and walk away with probation, or fight this and spend the next 3 decades in federal prison. Your choice. He left. Lena sat alone in the interrogation room, staring at the two-way mirror. Behind it, people were watching her, analyzing her, waiting to see if she'd break. She thought about Webb, Reeves, Kowalski. Good people who trusted her, who were now facing decades in prison because she'd brought them into this. She thought about Private Brennan, alive because she'd shown up when it mattered. She thought about Danny, dead because someone else had made a selfish choice. The math didn't work. It never worked. You couldn't balance individual lives against institutional logic, but you had to choose anyway. 2 hours. That's what Vance had given her. She used the first 30 minutes to examine the room. No cameras that she could see, but the mirror meant audio surveillance for sure. The door was solid, locked from outside. No windows. No way out except cooperation. She used the next 30 minutes to think through scenarios. If she cooperated, Volkov would eventually be released back to Russia. The Virathex would be destroyed. The pharmaceutical company would continue operating without consequences. And 500 doses of life-saving medication would disappear into an evidence locker and then an incinerator. If she refused to cooperate, she'd go to prison. Her team would go to prison. But the case would go to trial, which meant discovery, which meant the Virathex would become part of public record. The media would cover it. People would ask questions about why the medication existed and why it had been suppressed. 30 years in prison versus institutional exposure. She was still weighing the options when the door opened. Shaw came in again. This time he looked rattled. We've got a problem, he said quietly. Volkov's transport just reported an incident. She's escaped. Lena stood. How? Unknown. She was in a secure vehicle with 4 guards. They stopped for a scheduled check. And when they opened the door, she was gone. 2 guards unconscious, 1 dead, 1 missing. She had help. Obviously. Which means there are more FSB operatives in the area than we thought. Shaw moved closer, lowering his voice. Lena, you need to cooperate now. If Volkov's loose, she's going to come after you. You're a loose end. You know her face, her operation, her contacts. She'll eliminate you the first chance she gets. Or she'll come after the Virathex. Shaw's expression confirmed she was right. Where is it? Lena asked. Where did Vance take the medication? I can't tell you that. Shaw. If Volkov gets to it first, she won't. It's in a secure facility with military guards. The same military guards that just let her escape from a secure transport? Shaw's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. FSB-trained operatives didn't just escape from custody without inside help. Someone in the chain of command was compromised. I need you to trust Vance, Shaw said. He knows what he's doing. Does he? Because right now it looks like he's protecting a pharmaceutical company while a foreign operative runs loose with enough resources to breach military security. The lights went out. Emergency backup kicked in after 3 seconds, bathing the room in red. An alarm started blaring, not the building alarm, something else. Something Shaw recognized instantly. Perimeter breach. He pulled his sidearm, moved to the door. Stay here, don't move. Shaw! But he was already gone.
the door slamming behind him. Lena stood in the red-lit room, listening to the alarm wail. Outside, she could hear shouting, running footsteps, the distinctive sound of weapons being readied. The facility was under attack. Volkov wasn't coming for Lena. She was coming for the Virathex, and she was willing to burn down a military installation to get it. The door burst open. Not Shaw, not Vance. A man in tactical gear with no identifying marks, the same kind of gear Volkov's operatives had worn. He pointed a weapon at her chest. "Come with me." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "You misunderstand. That wasn't a request." He grabbed her arm, yanked her toward the door. Lena's training kicked in. She twisted, drove her elbow into his throat, felt the cartilage give. He staggered back, weapon dropping. She scooped it up, checked the magazine. Fully loaded. The hallway outside was chaos. Smoke, strobing emergency lights, soldiers running in both directions. She heard gunfire from somewhere deeper in the facility, the sharp crack of rifles, the deeper boom of something heavier. Volkov had brought an army. Lena moved against the wall, weapon ready. She'd been in combat before, knew how to read a firefight. This wasn't an extraction. This was a war. She needed to find Vance, needed to find the Virathex before Volkov did. A soldier appeared from around a corner, Coast Guard uniform, rifle up. He saw her, weapon in hand, and hesitated for just a second. "Don't shoot," Lena said quickly. "I'm Lena Moss. I was in interrogation. Where's Colonel Vance?" "Secure wing, coordinating defense." The soldier was young, couldn't be more than 22. "Ma'am, you need to get to the safe room." An explosion cut him off. The far end of the hallway erupted in fire and smoke. The blast wave knocked them both down. Lena's ears rang. The soldier was trying to speak, but she couldn't hear him over the high-pitched whine in her head. She pulled him to his feet, and that's when she saw the blood. He'd been hit by shrapnel, multiple wounds across his left side, arterial bleeding from his thigh. "I need a med kit," she shouted, could barely hear her own voice. The soldier pointed to a door marked supply. Lena hauled him there, kicked it open. Inside was exactly what she needed. Trauma supplies, bandages, tourniquets. She pulled the soldier inside and went to work. Tourniquet first. Above the wound, cinched tight until the bleeding slowed. Pressure dressing second. His uniform was soaked, which meant he was already hypovolemic. She needed IV fluids, but there wasn't time. "What's your name?" she asked, more to keep him conscious than because she needed to know. "Patterson. Danny Patterson." The name hit like a physical blow. Danny. Just like her brother. "Okay, Danny, you're going to be fine, but I need you to stay awake. Can you do that?" He nodded. His face was pale, lips going gray. She'd stopped the bleeding, but he'd already lost too much blood. He needed a hospital, needed surgery. She keyed the radio on his vest. "This is Lena Moss. I've got a wounded soldier in the supply room, East Wing. He needs immediate medevac." Static, then a voice she recognized. Shaw. "Moss? What the hell are you doing?" "My job. Where's the Virathex?" "Lena, get to safety. That's an order." "I don't take orders from you. Where's the medication?" A pause. Then Shaw's voice came back, quieter. "Lower level, Vault 3. But it's about to be overrun. Volkov's team is through the north wall. They're heading straight for it." "How many?" "At least 12, maybe more. We've got 20 personnel defending. It's not enough." Lena looked at Danny Patterson, 22 years old, bleeding out, just trying to do his job. She thought about Private Brennan, about all the soldiers she'd saved, all the lives she'd pulled back from the edge. She thought about 500 doses of Virathex sitting in a vault while people fought and died around it, and she made a decision. "Shaw, I need you to do something for me. I need you to clear a path to Vault 3. "Are you insane? You'll get yourself killed." "Maybe, but if Volkov gets that medication, everything we've been through means nothing. She'll sell it to the highest bidder, and it'll never reach the people who need it." "That's not your problem." "Yes," Lena said. "It is." She checked the weapon she'd taken, safety off, round chambered. Then she looked at Danny Patterson. "I have to go. Someone will be here for you in 5 minutes. Keep pressure on that wound. Don't fall asleep." "Where are you going?" "To finish this." She stepped into the hallway. Smoke was thick now, burning her throat. Somewhere ahead, she could hear sustained gunfire, the sounds of a defensive position being overwhelmed. She moved toward it,
weapon ready, every sense screaming at her to turn around. But she didn't turn around, because somewhere in this facility, 500 doses of medication sat waiting, and the only person standing between those doses and Volkov was her. The hallway opened into a stairwell. Bodies on the floor, soldiers and operatives dead or dying. She checked each one as she passed, found 2 still breathing, stopped long enough to stabilize them, then kept moving. Down 2 levels. The vault was supposed to be here, but the hallway had collapsed, ceiling caved in, blocking the path. She could hear fighting on the other side, close. There had to be another way. She backtracked, found a maintenance corridor. Narrow, dark, the kind of space designed for pipes and wiring. She squeezed through, weapon leading, emerged on the other side of the collapse, and found herself face to face with Volkov. The Russian woman was covered in dust and blood, not all of it hers. She had 3 operatives with her, all armed, all moving with purpose toward a heavy door at the end of the hallway. The vault. Volkov saw Lena and smiled. Nightingale. I was hoping you'd show up. Walk away, Volkov. This doesn't end well for you. Doesn't it? Volkov gestured to her operatives. We're through your defenses. The vault will be open in minutes. And then we take the medication and disappear. You can't stop us. I can slow you down. By yourself? With 1 weapon against 4? I've beaten worse odds. Volkov's smile widened. Then let's see the legend in action. Her operatives raised their weapons, and Lena pulled the trigger. The shot went wide. Not because Lena missed, she never missed at this range, but because Shaw tackled her from behind, driving her into the wall hard enough to crack plaster. The weapon clattered from her hand. Stand down, Shaw hissed in her ear. That's an order. Volkov's operatives had their weapons trained on both of them now. The Russian woman looked amused. Your friends keep interrupting at the worst moments, she said. Captain Shaw, wasn't it? The one who gave her the phone number. Shaw's grip on Lena tightened. She could feel his pulse hammering against her back. He was scared, but trying not to show it. Let her go, Volkov. This facility is locked down. You're not getting out. We're already out. Volkov checked her watch. Extraction helicopter arrives in 4 minutes. By then, we'll have the medication and be gone. You can chase us if you'd like, but I suspect you'll be too busy dealing with the fires we've set. Fires? Plural. North Wing, Medical Bay, Armory. Mostly distractions, but the Armory fire is real. You have about 8 minutes before the munitions start cooking off. Volkov smiled. So you can waste time with us, or you can save your people. Choose quickly. Shaw's hesitation told Lena everything. He was calculating, weighing options, trying to find a play that didn't end with everyone dead. But there wasn't one. Volkov had planned this perfectly. Let me go, Lena said quietly. Not a chance. Shaw, the Armory, is not your problem. His voice was strained. I'm getting you out of here, now. He started dragging her backward. Volkov's operatives tracked them with their weapons but didn't fire. They had what they wanted, clear access to the vault. Lena and Shaw were already irrelevant. Volkov turned to the vault door. One of her operatives was already working on the lock with some kind of electronic device. The progress bar on its screen was at 70%. Shaw, listen to me. Lena kept her voice level. You know what happens if she gets that medication. You know where it ends up. I know we both die if we stay here. Then let me die for something that matters. Shaw's grip loosened for just a second. That was all Lena needed. She twisted hard, broke his hold, drove her palm into his solar plexus. He staggered back, gasping. She scooped up the fallen weapon. This time when she fired, she didn't aim for Volkov. She aimed for the electronic lock device. The shot was perfect. The device exploded in a shower of sparks and plastic. The operative working the lock jerked back, shaking burned fingers. The vault door remained sealed. Volkov's amusement vanished. Kill her. The operatives opened fire. Lena was already moving, diving behind a support pillar as rounds chewed into concrete. Shaw had recovered enough to return fire, forcing the operatives to take cover. The hallway became a kill box, crossfire. Nowhere to run, the vault door between them all. You just cost yourself 4 minutes, Volkov shouted over the gunfire. We'll blast the door open if we have to. Then do it, Lena called back. But you'll damage whatever's inside. Virathex is unstable at high temperatures. You blast that door, you risk destroying the entire batch. It was a bluff. She had no idea Virathex was temperature sensitive, but Volkov didn't know that either. The Russian woman barked orders in a language Lena didn't recognize. The shooting stopped. One of the operatives pulled out a different device. This one looked like a thermal lance designed for cutting through metal. Slower than explosives, but precise. 2 minutes, Volkov said. That's how long you have left to live. Use them wisely. Shaw had positioned himself behind an overturned desk. His face was bleeding from flying debris, and his hands weren't steady. He looked at Lena with something between fury and resignation. You should have let me pull you out. You should have known I wouldn't. Yeah, he laughed, short and bitter. Yeah, I should have. The thermal lance ignited with a hiss. White-hot flame began cutting through the vault door. 60 seconds, maybe less, and Volkov would have what she came for. Lena's mind raced. She couldn't stop them from opening the door. Couldn't fight 4 armed operatives with 1 magazine of ammunition. Couldn't evacuate the medication before they grabbed it, but she could make sure they didn't leave with it. Shaw, how stable is the floor here? What? The floor. This is a lower level. What's beneath us? Shaw's eyes widened. Maintenance tunnels, utility access. Why? Oh no, no. Lena, don't even think about it. If I collapse the floor, the Virathex falls into the tunnels. Volkov can't extract it in time, and we can retrieve it later. You'll bring down half the building. Better than letting her walk away with it. People will die. Our people. People are already dying. Lena checked her weapon. 7 rounds left. And they'll keep dying if that medication disappears into the black market. The thermal lance was halfway through the vault door. Molten metal dripped onto the floor like glowing tears. 30 seconds. Lena made her decision. She stepped out from behind the pillar and fired, not at the operatives, but at the support beam closest to the vault. Concrete chips flew. The beam cracked, but held. She fired again. Again. The structural damage was spreading, spiderwebbing across the ceiling. What are you doing? Volkov screamed. Ending this! The vault door fell inward. Lock finally breached. But before Volkov's operatives could reach the medication inside, the floor beneath them gave way. The collapse was catastrophic. 20 feet of reinforced concrete pancaking down into the maintenance level below, taking the vault, the operatives, and Volkov with it. Dust and debris erupted like a volcano. The sound was deafening, thunder compressed into a single second of destruction. Lena and Shaw were on the edge of the collapse. The floor beneath them cracked, tilted, started to give way. Shaw grabbed her arm and hauled them both back toward the stairwell as the hallway disintegrated behind them. They made it through the stairwell door as the rest of the floor collapsed. The door slammed shut on a wall of dust and screaming metal. They lay on the stairs, coughing, ears ringing, alive by inches. You're insane, Shaw gasped. Probably. Below them, through the settling dust, Lena could hear voices, Russian, angry. Volkov had survived the fall. So had at least some of her team. But they were trapped now. The collapse had sealed them in the maintenance level with no easy way out. And the Virathex, if it had survived the fall, was somewhere in the wreckage with them. We need to get down there, Lena said. We need to get out of this building before the armory blows. How much time? Shaw checked his watch. 4 minutes, maybe less. Then we move fast. They descended the stairs at a run. The lower level was chaos, twisted metal, broken pipes spewing water and steam, electrical fires sparking in the walls. Through the haze, Lena could see the vault, cracked open like an egg, its contents spilled across the rubble. The Virathex cases were there, most of them intact, some shattered, their contents leaking into the concrete. And standing over them, bloodied but defiant, was Volkov. She had a gun trained on Lena before they were halfway across the room. You just don't quit, do you? Neither do you, Lena said. Then we're at an impasse. Volkov gestured to her surviving operatives, 2 of them, both injured but armed. I have the medication. You have no way to stop me from taking it, but you collapsed the exit, which means we're all trapped here together. So what now? Do we kill each other and let the medication burn, or do we negotiate? There's nothing to negotiate. I disagree. Volkov kicked one of the Virathex cases. I want this medication. You want it to reach people who need it. Those goals aren't incompatible. You're going to sell it. To relief organizations, yes, for significantly less than market value. I'm not a monster, Lena. I'm a businesswoman, and there's profit to be made in doing the right thing if you know who to sell to. You're lying. Am I? Volkov pulled out a sat phone, held up the screen. On it was a contact list, organizations Lena recognized. Doctors Without Borders, Red Cross, UNICEF. I already have buyers lined up. They know what this medication can do. They're willing to pay $500,000 per case to get it into the field. That's pocket change for them, and a fortune for me. Everyone wins. Lena stared at the phone. It could be fake. Volkov could be lying about everything, but something in her expression suggested she wasn't. Why would relief organizations deal with you? Because I get them things they can't get through official channels. Medications that are suppressed, equipment that's embargoed, information that's classified. I operate in the gray areas, Lena. I'm not proud of it, but I'm effective. Volkov lowered her weapon slightly. You want this medication to save lives. So do I. The only difference is I'm willing to profit from it. Shaw moved up beside Lena. She's trying to manipulate you. I know. Then why are you listening? Because Volkov was right about one thing. They were at an impasse. The building was coming down in 3 minutes. If they kept fighting, everyone died and the medication burned. If they walked away, Volkov took the Verithex and it disappeared into whatever network she worked for. But if Volkov was telling the truth about her buyers, prove it, Lena said. Call one of them, right now. Let me verify they're real. Volkov smiled. Smart. She dialed a number, put the phone on speaker. It rang twice. A woman answered, her accent unmistakably French. Yes? Dr. Moreau, it's Volkov. I have someone here who wants to confirm our arrangement regarding the hemorrhagic fever medication. A pause. Who is this person? Former U.S. Army medic. She needs to hear that you're legitimate. Another pause, longer. Then Dr. Moreau spoke directly to Lena. If you're listening, you should know that what Volkov does is morally gray at best. But she's never lied to me about a shipment. If she says she has Verithex, she has it. And if she says she'll deliver it to our clinics in South Sudan, she will. We've done business 4 times in the past 2 years. She's expensive and unpredictable, but she's reliable. The line went dead. Lena looked at Volkov. You're still breaking laws. So are you. The difference is I'm getting paid for it. And the pharmaceutical company? They'll come after you. They'll try. But I have insurance, documentation of their suppression efforts, proof of Dr. Ortiz's murder, enough evidence to bury them in lawsuits if they make trouble. Volkov's expression hardened. They won't touch me. And they won't touch you either, if you're smart. What does that mean? It means you're about to be a hero, Lena. The nurse who exposed pharmaceutical corruption, who risked everything to save lives, who stood up to the system. The media will love you. And once you're famous, you're untouchable. The company can't silence you without proving everything you've said is true. It was a calculated play. Volkov wanted Lena as an ally, or at least as cover. If Lena endorsed what Volkov was doing, it legitimized the whole operation. The building shuddered. Somewhere above them, something exploded, probably the armory. They had less than 2 minutes. We need to move, Shaw said urgently. All of us, now. Take the medication, Lena said to Volkov. Get it to your buyers. But if I find out you lied, if I find out those cases went anywhere except relief organizations, I will hunt you down. Noted? Volkov gestured to her operatives. They began loading Verithex cases onto a stretcher they'd improvised from wreckage. There's an emergency access tunnel 30 meters east. It leads to a drainage outlet by the river. That's our exit. You're welcome to join us. We're not helping you escape. Then enjoy the fire. Volkov's team moved fast, hauling the medication toward a gap in the collapsed wall. Within seconds, they disappeared into the darkness beyond. Shaw grabbed Lena's arm. We have to go. Right now. They ran. Back through the maintenance level, up emergency stairs that groaned under their weight, through hallways filled with smoke and heat. The building was dying around them. Pipes burst, spraying superheated steam. Electrical systems overloaded, sparking like fireworks. The armory must have been cooking off completely now. The explosions were constant, a rolling thunder that shook the floor beneath their feet. They burst through an exit door into cold night air. The facility sprawled behind them, flames licking from a dozen windows. Personnel were evacuating in organized chaos, soldiers carrying wounded, officers shouting orders, vehicles racing to defensive positions. And standing in the center of it all, directing the response like a general commanding a battlefield, was Colonel Vance. He saw Lena and Shaw emerge from the building. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: relief, fury, exhaustion. "You two need to come with me," he said, "right now." They didn't have the energy to argue. Vance led them to a command vehicle parked 50 yards from the burning facility. Inside was a mobile operations center, computers, communications equipment, tactical displays showing the facility layout, and sitting at the main console, handcuffed to a chair, was Dr. Marcus Hale. Lena stopped dead. "What is he doing here?" "Telling us everything," Vance said grimly. "Turns out your former boss has been quite busy." Hale looked like he'd aged 20 years. His eyes were red, his hands shaking. When he saw Lena, something in him crumbled further. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Start talking," Vance ordered. "Tell her what you told me." Hale took a shuddering breath. 3 years ago, I made a mistake. Killed a patient through negligence. The hospital covered it up, but someone found out. Someone from Mercer Pharmaceuticals, the company that manufactures half our medications. They had evidence. Photos of the incident report before it was altered. Testimony from a nurse who saw what really happened. They said they'd destroy me unless I helped them. Help them how? Lena's voice was ice. Information. They wanted to know about certain patients, specifically anyone involved in pharmaceutical research or trials, anyone who might be a whistleblower. I gave them names, medical records, everything. Hale's voice broke. One of those names was Dr. Sarah Ortiz. She'd been a patient at Redwood General 2 months before she died. She came in for a minor procedure, and I told them she'd been there. Told them she'd been asking questions about clinical trials and FDA approval processes. A week later, she was dead. The room went silent. Even Vance looked shaken. "You got her killed," Lena said. "I didn't know I thought they'd just threaten her, pressure her to stay quiet. I didn't know they'd actually—" Hale couldn't finish the sentence. "After she died, I tried to stop. Told them I was done. But they owned me by then. They knew everything. So I kept feeding them information. And then you showed up. What about me? They wanted to know about you too. After your name started appearing in military reports, after the Yemen operation got leaked, Mercer became interested. They thought you might know something about Virathex, that you'd been part of the original field trials. So they told me to watch you, report on anything unusual. When I fired you yesterday, it was partly because they'd told me to get rid of you before you became a problem." Lena felt like she'd been punched. Everything, her firing, Hale's paranoia, his desperate apology at her apartment, it hadn't been about his guilt over the patient he'd killed. It had been about covering his tracks with Mercer. "How deep does this go?" Vance asked quietly. "Deep." Hale pulled a flash drive from his pocket with his cuffed hands. "I kept copies of everything. Every communication with Mercer, every name I gave them, every payment they made to hospital administrators to look the other way. It's all here." Vance took the flash drive, handled it like it was made of plutonium. "This is enough to bring down their entire operation. It's also enough to get me killed." Hale looked at Lena. "That's why I came here tonight. Not to save myself, but to make sure someone knows the truth. If I disappear tomorrow, if I have another convenient accident, at least the evidence will survive. You should have come forward 3 years ago." "I know, but I was weak, scared, and I convinced myself I was protecting the hospital, protecting my career, protecting everything except what actually mattered." Hale's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You were right about me, Lena. I'm not a good doctor. I'm not even a good person. I'm just someone who made bad choices and kept making them until there was nothing good left." Lena wanted to rage at him, wanted to scream about Dr. Ortiz, about the lives destroyed by his cowardice. But looking at him now, broken, terrified, finally honest, she felt something unexpected. Pity. "What happens to him?" she asked Vance. "Witness protection, probably. If his information is as valuable as he claims, the Justice Department will cut a deal. He testifies against Mercer, he gets immunity." "That's not justice." "No," Vance agreed. But it's how the system works. We trade small fish for big ones. Another explosion rocked the facility. The armory was fully engulfed now. Vance barked orders into his radio, coordinating fire response. Through the window, Lena could see the chaos continuing. Medical personnel treating wounded, engineers assessing structural damage, investigators already trying to piece together what had happened. And somewhere out there, Volkov was escaping with 500 doses of Virathex. "Sir," Shaw said quietly, "Volkov got away. With the medication." "I know." Vance didn't look surprised. "We tracked her emergency exit. Lost the signal near the river. She's gone." "You're not going after her?" "With what? Half my personnel are injured. The facility's compromised. And honestly," Vance turned to look at Lena, "I'm not sure I want to catch her." "What does that mean?" "It means I spent 6 months watching that medication sit in evidence lockup, knowing people were dying, knowing we couldn't do anything about it because of politics and corporate pressure. And now it's not my problem anymore. If Volkov delivers it to relief organizations like she claimed, then maybe something good comes out of this disaster." "That's a hell of a risk," Shaw said. "Everything's a risk. At least this one might save lives." Vance pulled out his phone, made a call. "General Hammond?" "Colonel Vance. Yes, sir. The situation is contained. We have casualties, but nothing critical. And sir, we need to talk about Mercer Pharmaceuticals. I have evidence of corporate espionage, blackmail, and possible murder. I'm sending you the file now. You'll want to see this." He hung up, looked at Lena. "You should go home." "I don't have a home. You arrested me, remember?" "All charges dropped. You were working on intelligence gathering capacity under my authorization. That's the official story." "That's a lie. That's politics." Vance's expression softened. "Lena, you did something tonight that I couldn't do. You made the hard choice. You prioritized lives over protocol. You probably broke 24 laws doing it, but you were right. And I'm not going to punish you for being right when I was wrong." "What about my team? Webb, Reeves, Kowalski?" "Released an hour ago. No charges. They were private security contractors hired for protective services. Nothing illegal about that." "And Volkov?" "Is a problem for another day. Right now I need to explain to the Pentagon why one of my facilities is on fire and a foreign operative escaped with classified materials." Vance started to turn away, then stopped. "For what it's worth, you would have made a hell of an instructor. The offer's still open. When you're ready." He walked away, already coordinating the next phase of the response. Shaw touched Lena's arm. "Come on, let's get you checked out by medical." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You collapsed a building, got into a firefight with Russian operatives, and probably have a concussion. You're getting checked out." They walked toward the medical tents. Personnel were everywhere, some crying, some laughing with the kind of manic relief that came from surviving something that should have killed them. Lena saw Danny Patterson being loaded into an ambulance. He was conscious, giving a weak thumbs up to the paramedics. She'd saved his life. That had to count for something. The medical tent was organized chaos. Nurses triaging patients, doctors performing emergency procedures, supplies being rationed and redistributed. Lena felt herself falling into old patterns, assessing who needed help most urgently, calculating treatment priorities, her hands wanting to move even though she was supposed to be a patient. A nurse approached her. Young woman, maybe 25, with tired eyes and capable hands. She looked at Lena's smoke-stained clothes and bloodied face. "You need stitches," she said. "Come with me. I can do it myself." "I'm sure you can, but you don't have to." Something in those words broke through Lena's defenses. She followed the nurse to a treatment station and sat down. The nurse worked efficiently, cleaning wounds, placing sutures, checking for signs of concussion. Professional, skilled, exactly the kind of person Lena had tried to be at Redwood General. "You're Nightingale, aren't you?" the nurse asked quietly. "That's not my name anymore." "But it was. I read about what you did in Syria, about the compound operation, the 12-hour firefight, keeping 3 critical patients alive with nothing but a headlamp and a field kit. That's the reason I became a nurse." The nurse finished the last suture and met Lena's eyes. "Thank you for showing people like me that we can make a difference." Lena didn't know what to say to that. Before tonight, she'd thought her army career was something to escape from. A chapter she'd closed because she wasn't strong enough to keep it open. But maybe it wasn't about strength. Maybe it was about knowing when to step back and when to step forward. "What's your name?" Lena asked. "Alicia Martinez." "You did good work tonight, Alicia. Keep doing it." "I will." Martinez smiled. "And for what it's worth, whatever happened tonight, whatever you did, I'm glad you did it. The rumor is you saved medication that was going to be destroyed. If that's true, you're a hero." "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who couldn't walk away." "That's what heroes are." Martinez moved on to the next patient. Lena sat there, processing everything. Around her, the tent continued its organized chaos. People saving people, systems working the way they were supposed to. All of it fragile, all of it imperfect, but functional because individuals chose to show up and do the work. Her phone buzzed. The real one, not the burner Shaw had given her. She'd gotten it back at some point during the evacuation, along with her other possessions. The screen showed a text from an unknown number. The medication reached its first destination. Clinic in South Sudan. They're already administering doses. Mortality rate dropping as we speak. You were right to trust me. V attached was a photo. A clinic, dirt-floored and overcrowded, but the patients were alive. And on a makeshift table in the foreground sat cases of Virathex, being distributed by doctors who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Lena stared at the photo. Volkov had kept her word. Against every expectation, every cynical calculation, the Russian operative had actually delivered the medication where it needed to go. Another text arrived. This one from Shaw. Pentagon confirmed. Mercer Pharmaceuticals under federal investigation. CEO resigned. Stock price collapsed. They're finished. You did this. Then a third text. This one from a number she recognized. Webb. Boss, we're all good. No charges, no record, no problems. Kowalski wants to know if you're hiring for more jobs. Reeves says you're insane, but she'd work with you again. I'm just glad we survived. Drinks on me when this settles. You earned it. Lena closed her eyes. She'd broken laws, destroyed property, defied orders, and nearly gotten herself killed. She'd worked with a foreign operative, stolen medication from federal custody, and collapsed a military facility. By any reasonable standard, she should be in prison. But 500 people in South Sudan were alive because of what she'd done. And a pharmaceutical company that had suppressed life-saving medication for profit was crumbling under federal investigation. The cost-benefit analysis didn't balance. It never did. But maybe that was okay. Moss. She opened her eyes. Dr. Hale stood in the entrance of the medical tent, still handcuffed but accompanied by federal marshals now. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of everything he'd confessed. "I just wanted to say goodbye," he said. "They're taking me into protective custody tonight. I don't know when I'll see daylight again. That's not through a courtroom window." "Good." "Yeah, good." Hale smiled bitterly. "I spent 3 years hating you because you were everything I wasn't, competent, confident, actually gave a damn about patients instead of just covering my own mistakes. And it took losing everything for me to finally understand what that meant. Understanding doesn't undo the damage. No, it doesn't, but maybe it prevents someone else from making the same mistakes." Hale gestured to the marshals. "I need to go. But Lena, for what it's worth, you were the best nurse I ever worked with, and I'm sorry I was too small to see it until it was too late." The marshals led him away. Lena watched him go and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, not even pity anymore. Just a tired recognition that broken people sometimes stayed broken, and the best you could do was limit the damage they caused on the way down. Shaw reappeared with coffee, actual decent coffee, not the military-grade sludge. He handed her a cup and sat down beside her. "Vance wants you to know the offer is still on the table. Instructor position, advanced field trauma, your curriculum, your schedule. He's serious about it." "I know." "Are you going to take it?" Lena sipped the coffee. It was hot and bitter and exactly what she needed. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a week when I can think straight." "Fair." Shaw was quiet for a moment. "You know, when I pulled you out of that hallway earlier, when I thought you were going to get yourself killed, I was so angry. I thought you'd lost your mind, but you hadn't. You'd just decided that some things were worth dying for. I didn't die. But you were willing to." "That's what matters." Shaw looked at her. "The Army could use people like that. Hell, the world could use people like that." The world has plenty of people willing to die for what they believe in. It needs more people willing to live for it. Then live for it. Take the instructor position. Train the next generation. Give them the skills you have, the judgment, the courage to make hard calls when everything's falling apart. Lena didn't answer. She was thinking about Private Brennan, about Danny Patterson, about all the soldiers she'd saved and the ones she hadn't, about the thin line between hero and victim, and how often it came down to luck more than skill. The sun was starting to rise. Through the open tent flap, she could see the horizon turning from black to gray to pale orange. A new day. The facility was still burning, but the fires were contained now. People were cleaning up, rebuilding, moving forward, because that's what people did. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert. The headline made her hands go cold. Pharmaceutical giant under federal investigation. Former hospital administrator exposes corruption scandal. The article detailed everything. Mercer's suppression of Verathex, the blackmail of Dr. Hale, the suspicious death of Dr. Ortiz. It mentioned Lena by name, called her a whistleblower who'd risked everything to expose the truth. The story was already going viral, thousands of shares in the first hour. They made you famous, Shaw said, reading over her shoulder. Volkov was right. You're untouchable now. I don't want to be famous. Too late. More alerts flooded in. Interview requests from major networks. Messages from advocacy groups. A statement from Doctors Without Borders confirming they'd received Verathex shipments and were already deploying them in affected regions. The story was bigger than Lena, bigger than Mercer, bigger than any individual piece. It was a reckoning. Her phone rang. The number was blocked, but she answered anyway. Congratulations, Volkov's voice said. You're a hero. I'm a criminal who got lucky. No. You're someone who did what needed to be done. There's a difference. Volkov paused. I meant what I said earlier. You want to keep making a difference? I can always use someone with your skills. The pay is better than the army, and the work is more interesting. I'm not joining your operation. I didn't think you would, but the offer stands. If you ever change your mind, you know how to find me. Another pause. And Lena, thank you for trusting me when you had no reason to. I won't forget it. The line went dead. Lena sat there holding the phone, staring at the rising sun, feeling the weight of everything settle onto her shoulders. She'd exposed corruption, saved lives, brought down a pharmaceutical company. She'd done the right thing in the wrong way, and now she had to live with the consequences. But as the sun climbed higher and the day began in earnest, she realized something. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't hiding, wasn't pretending to be someone smaller, quieter, less capable than she actually was. She was just Lena Moss, former Army medic, whistleblower. The woman who'd decided 500 lives were worth risking everything for. And maybe that was enough. Come on, Shaw said, standing. Vance wants a full debrief. After that, you're free to go. But Lena, think about the instructor position. You'd be good at it. I'll think about it. They walked out of the medical tent together into the morning light. Behind them, the facility was scarred but standing. Around them, people were doing the work of recovery, the unglamorous, exhausting labor of picking up pieces and trying again. Lena's phone buzzed one more time, a text from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. My name is David Brennan. You saved my life 2 days ago. The doctors told me about everything you did, how you performed field surgery in the rain, how you refused to give up even when everyone said I wouldn't make it. I don't have words big enough to thank you, but I wanted you to know that because of you, I get to go home. I get to see my mom again. I get to keep living. Thank you doesn't cover it, but thank you anyway. Attached was a photo. Private Brennan in a hospital bed, bandaged but smiling, holding up a handwritten sign that read, Nightingale Saves Lives. Lena stared at the photo until her vision blurred. Then she closed the phone and kept walking. Ahead of her, Vance was waiting by the command vehicle. When he saw her approaching, he straightened. Moss, one more thing before you go. Sir? Vance pulled an envelope from his jacket. This arrived this morning. It's addressed to you. She took the envelope. It was thick, official-looking, with a Pentagon seal. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single document, a presidential commendation for extraordinary civilian service. And below that, a personal note in handwriting she didn't recognize. Ms. Moss, your actions have saved countless lives and exposed corruption that threaten public health worldwide. The nation owes you a debt it cannot repay. But please know that your courage did not go unnoticed. You are proof that one person can make a difference, even when the system fails. Thank you for your service, both in uniform and out of it. The signature at the bottom was illegible, but the title below it was clear: President of the United States. Lena looked up at Vance. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You earned it, he said quietly. Every word. I broke laws. You saved lives. In my book, that counts for more. Vance held out his hand. The instructor position starts in 2 weeks if you want it. No pressure. But I hope you say yes. We need people like you teaching the next generation. Not just the skills, but the judgment. The courage to do what's right even when orders say otherwise. Lena shook his hand. I'll let you know. That's all I ask. She walked away from the burning facility, from the chaos, from everything. Shaw had arranged for a car to take her back to Millbrook, but she asked the driver to stop at the retention pond where this had all started, where she'd been fired, where the helicopters had landed, where her old life had ended and something new had begun. She stood at the edge of the water as the sun climbed higher. Behind her, she could hear the city waking up. Traffic, voices, the ordinary sounds of people living their lives. Ahead of her, the water was calm, reflecting the sky like glass. Her phone buzzed. One final message. This one from an email account she'd never seen before. The subject line was simple. Thank you. She opened it. The message contained no text, just a single image. Hundreds of people, men, women, children, standing outside a clinic in South Sudan. They were smiling, healthy, alive because of medication that had almost been destroyed, delivered by a Russian operative with flexible morals, saved by a nurse who'd decided rules mattered less than lives. At the bottom of the image, someone had added a caption in shaky handwriting, "You gave us hope." Lena closed her phone. She stood there until the sun was fully up, burning away the last of the night. Then she turned and walked back to the car. 2 weeks later, she'd make her decision about the instructor position. She'd rebuild her life, train new medics, maybe find some kind of peace. But right now, in this moment, she was just a woman who'd survived impossible odds and come out the other side changed. The driver opened the door. Lena climbed in. As they pulled away from the pond, she looked back one last time. The hospital loomed in the distance, the place that had tried to make her invisible. They'd failed. She was Nightingale. And the whole world knew it now. The car dropped her at an address she'd never been to before. A converted warehouse in downtown Millbrook. 3 stories of brick and glass that looked more like an art gallery than a training facility. But the sign by the door was unmistakable. Advanced Field Medicine Center, and below it, in smaller letters, opening in 2 weeks. Lena stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the building. This was what Vance had meant by your curriculum, your schedule. He hadn't just offered her a job, he'd built her an entire program. The front door opened. Vance stepped out, followed by Shaw and 2 people Lena didn't recognize. A woman in her 50s wearing medical scrubs and a younger man with Army insignia on his jacket. You came, Vance said. I wasn't sure you would. I didn't say I was taking the job. You're here. That's enough. Vance gestured to the building. Want to see what we've built? She followed them inside. The first floor was a massive open space. Medical training stations, simulation equipment, rows of exam tables, and surgical lights. Everything state-of-the-art. Everything designed for one purpose. Teaching people how to save lives when everything was falling apart. This is Dr. Patricia Huang, Vance said, introducing the woman in scrubs. She ran field hospitals in Afghanistan for 12 years. Best trauma surgeon I've ever worked with. And this is Lieutenant Marcus Green. He's coordinating with Army medical schools to recruit students. Dr. Huang extended her hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes sharp. Nightingale. I've been waiting 3 years to meet you. The Yemen operation is required reading in my classes. It shouldn't be. I barely remember half of it. That's because you were in survival mode for 12 hours straight. But your techniques, the way you prioritized casualties, improvised equipment, maintained mental clarity under sustained fire, that's what separates good medics from legends. Huang smiled. I'm here because Vance promised me I'd get to work with you, so please tell me you're taking this job. Lena looked around the facility, at the equipment, the space, the potential. She thought about Private Brennan, about Danny Patterson, about all the medics she could train to make the difference between someone living and dying. "Can I see the second floor?" Green led the way up a steel staircase. The second floor was different, smaller rooms, more intimate. Classrooms with whiteboards already covered in medical diagrams. A library with shelves waiting to be filled. An office at the far end with windows overlooking the city. "That one's yours," Green said, "if you want it." The office was empty except for a desk and chair, but on the desk was a single item, a framed photo of her and Danny at his graduation, the same photo from her locker at Redwood General. "How did you get this?" Lena asked quietly. "Shaw retrieved it when we processed your belongings," Vance said from the doorway. "Thought you might want it here. Reminder of why you do this work." Lena picked up the frame. Danny's face smiled back at her, young, hopeful, unaware that he had 6 days left to live. She'd carried this photo through 3 years of trying to forget, trying to become someone different. But maybe forgetting wasn't the answer. Maybe remembering was. "There's something else," Vance said. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "This arrived this morning. Federal court ruling." Lena opened it. The document was dense legal language, but the conclusion was clear. Mercer Pharmaceuticals had been found guilty of suppressing life-saving medication, bribing federal officials, and conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Dr. Sarah Ortiz. The company was being dismantled, assets seized, executive board facing criminal charges. At the bottom was a personal note from the judge. "Justice delayed is not justice denied. Thank you for your courage in bringing this to light." "They're done," Shaw said. "Completely. The CEO is facing 30 years. Half the board has already fled the country. The company's stock is worthless. Everything they built is gone." Lena read the document twice, making sure she understood. Mercer wasn't just being investigated. They were being destroyed publicly, permanently. The kind of institutional collapse that sent messages through entire industries. "What about Hale?" she asked. "Witness protection, like we discussed. But he's testifying in 18 separate cases now. Every person Mercer blackmailed, every medication they suppressed, every bribe they paid. He's cooperating fully." Vance's expression was grim. "He'll never practice medicine again, but he's making sure the whole system burns down with him." "Good. There's more." Vance pulled out his phone, showed her a news article. "Redwood General is under new management. The entire administrative staff that knew about Hale's connection to Mercer has been fired. They're rebuilding from the ground up, and they want you to know your termination has been formally rescinded. Full back pay, benefits, everything. You're welcome to return if you want." Lena looked at the article, saw Dr. Marcus Hale's name mentioned alongside hospital executives who'd enabled him, saw quotes from nurses who'd worked with Lena talking about how she'd been the backbone of the ER, saw her own face in a photo. One someone had taken during her last shift, her standing at the nurses' station, focused and calm while chaos erupted around her. "I don't want to go back," she said. "I know. But you needed to know the option exists." She set down the phone and walked to the window. From here, she could see most of Millbrook, the hospital district, the industrial zone, the neighborhoods where people lived their ordinary lives. 3 days ago, she'd been fired from a job she'd poured 3 years into. Now she was standing in a facility built specifically for her, offered opportunities she'd never imagined, facing a choice that would define the rest of her life. "Can I have the office to myself for a minute?" she asked. They filed out without argument. Vance paused at the door. "Take your time. Whatever you decide, we'll respect it." The door closed. Lena stood alone with Danny's photo and the view of the city and the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed. Text from Webb. "Boss, you need to see this." Attached was a link to a video. She clicked it. The video showed a press conference, major networks, dozens of cameras. At the podium stood a woman Lena recognized from news coverage, Senator Rachel Morrison, chair of the Senate Health Committee. "This morning I'm announcing the Ortiz Act," Morrison said into the microphones. "Named after Dr. Sarah Ortiz, who died trying to expose pharmaceutical corruption. This legislation will create independent oversight of drug approval processes, mandate transparency in clinical trials, and establish criminal penalties for companies that suppress life-saving medications. It's time we put patients before profits." And this legislation is possible because one person had the courage to expose the truth. Lena Moss showed us that individuals can fight systems and win. Now it's our turn to make sure systems work for everyone. The video ended. Lena sat down heavily in the chair. The Ortiz Act, federal legislation named after the woman who died because Hale had given her name to Mercer. It wouldn't bring Dr. Ortiz back, but it meant her death hadn't been meaningless. Another text arrived. This one from Kowalski. Turn on Channel 7 right now. She found a live stream on her phone. Channel 7 was running a special report. Nightingale, the nurse who changed everything. The segment featured interviews with people she'd saved over the years. Soldiers from Syria, patients from Redwood General, civilians from medical emergencies she barely remembered. All of them telling their stories, showing their scars, explaining how Lena's intervention had given them second chances at life. One interview hit harder than the others. A woman in her 40s sitting in a comfortable living room, holding the hand of a teenage boy. "This is my son David," she said to the camera. 3 days ago, he was dying from a training accident. The doctor said he had minutes to live, but Lena Moss didn't accept that. She performed surgery in the mud, in the rain, with equipment she improvised on the spot. And because of her, my son is alive. He gets to go to college. He gets to have a future. She gave me my child back. The camera cut to Private David Brennan, no longer in a hospital bed, but sitting beside his mother, bandaged but alive. When he spoke, his voice was steady. "I don't remember most of what happened, but I remember her voice. She told me I wasn't going to die, and I believed her. That's what saved me. Not just her hands, but her certainty. Her refusal to accept that I was already gone." Brennan looked directly at the camera. "If you're watching this, Nightingale, thank you. You're the reason I'm here, and I'm going to make sure that matters." The segment ended with a montage, dozens of people holding signs that said, "Thank you, Nightingale," in different languages. Photos from South Sudan showing the Virathex clinic, patients who'd survived because of medication that almost didn't reach them. Statistics showing mortality rates dropping in real time as the medication was distributed. The anchor's final words stayed with Lena. "One person can't change the world, but they can change a world. One life, one decision, one moment of courage at a time." She turned off her phone and sat in the silence. 3 years ago, she'd left the army convinced she was broken, convinced Danny's death had destroyed whatever made her capable of saving lives. She'd spent those years trying to be invisible, trying to do good work quietly, trying not to think about the fact that her hands could perform miracles when she let them. But invisibility wasn't humility, it was hiding, and hiding didn't save lives. The door opened. Shaw walked in carrying 2 coffees. He handed her one and sat down across from her. "You're thinking too much," he said. "How do you know?" "Because you get this look, like you're running scenarios, weighing options, trying to calculate the perfect choice." Shaw sipped his coffee. "There is no perfect choice. There's just the choice you can live with. And what if I make the wrong one?" "Then you make another choice. That's how life works. You don't get to see the ending before you commit." He leaned forward. "But I'll tell you what I see. I see someone who spent 3 years hiding because she thought she wasn't good enough. And then when everything fell apart, when she had every reason to walk away, she showed up anyway. She risked everything to do what was right, and she won. I didn't win. I got lucky. Luck is what happens when skill meets opportunity. You had the skills, you made the opportunity. That's not luck. That's courage." Shaw stood. "Vance needs an answer by end of day. But Lena, whatever you decide, know this. You're not broken. You never were. You just needed to remember what you were capable of." He left. Lena sat alone for another 10 minutes. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. "This is Lena Moss. I need to speak with Colonel Vance." Vance answered immediately. "What's your decision?" "I'll take the position, but I have conditions." "I'm listening." "First, we don't just train Army medics. We train civilian emergency responders too, paramedics, nurses, anyone who wants to learn field trauma techniques. I'm not building an elite program for the military. I'm building something that helps everyone." "Agreed. What else?" "Second, we offer scholarships to people who can't afford training. No one gets turned away because they're poor. If they have the aptitude and the drive, we teach them." "Done. Anything else?" "Third, I want Webb, Reeves, and Kowalski on staff. They risked everything to back me up. I want them teaching tactical medicine, logistics, and field coordination." Vance was quiet for a moment. "Those are civilians with questionable backgrounds. Those are people who showed up when it mattered, just like you taught me to do." Another pause. Then Vance laughed. Actually laughed, something Lena had rarely heard from him. "You're going to be a pain in my ass, aren't you?" "Probably." "Good. We need more of that. You've got a deal. All 3 conditions. When can you start?" 2 weeks. I need time to settle some things first." "Take 3 if you need it. But Lena, thank you for saying yes, for showing up, for being exactly who we need you to be." The call ended. Lena sat there feeling something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Purpose. Not the desperate, grinding purpose of trying to prove she wasn't broken, but the clear, steady purpose of knowing exactly what she needed to do and having the tools to do it. She spent the rest of the day exploring the facility, met with Dr. Huang to discuss curriculum development, talked to Green about recruitment strategies, walked through the simulation rooms and imagined them filled with students, all learning to save lives, all carrying forward the work she'd started. As the sun began to set, she found herself back in her office. The photo of Danny sat on the desk, and she picked it up one more time. "I wish you could see this," she said to the image. "I think you'd be proud." Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Is this Lena Moss?" The voice was female, young, nervous. "Who's asking?" "My name is Sarah. Sarah Ortiz. I'm Dr. Ortiz's daughter." Lena's breath caught. "I'm so sorry about your mother." "Thank you, but that's not why I'm calling." Sarah's voice strengthened. "I wanted you to know that my mom was right about you." She kept a file on medics she thought were exceptional, people who could make a difference if given the chance. Your name was in that file. She'd been trying to contact you for months before she died, wanted to recruit you to help expose what Mercer was doing. I never got any messages, because someone intercepted them. We found emails on her computer that were never delivered. Someone was watching her, blocking her communications. But she kept trying, right up until the end. Lena closed her eyes. Dr. Ortiz had been trying to reach her, had seen something in Lena that Lena hadn't seen in herself, and she died before they could connect. "I'm sorry I couldn't help her," Lena said. "But you did. You finished what she started. You exposed Mercer. You got the medication out. You made sure her death meant something." Sarah's voice wavered. "I just wanted to say thank you, and to tell you that my mom would have been honored to know you carried on her work. I'm the one who's honored." They talked for another 10 minutes. Sarah told stories about her mother, the late nights spent reviewing research, the frustration with corporate control of medicine, the absolute conviction that healthcare was a right, not a privilege. By the time they hung up, Lena felt like she'd known Dr. Ortiz personally. And more than that, she felt the weight of responsibility to continue what the woman had started. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. Lena cleared out her apartment in Millbrook, donated most of her possessions, kept only what mattered. She met with lawyers to finalize her agreement with the Army, civilian contractor status, full autonomy over curriculum, protection from retaliation. She reached out to Webb, Reeves, and Kowalski, offered them positions they accepted without hesitation. And she made one final trip to Redwood General. The hospital looked the same from outside, but when she walked through the doors, everything was different. The staff at the intake desk recognized her immediately. Word spread through the ER like wildfire. Nightingale was here. Nurses she'd worked with rushed over, some crying, some laughing, all of them wanting to say something. "You were right about everything," one of them said. "We should have backed you up when Hale fired you. We were cowards. You were protecting your jobs." "I understand. But you weren't. You stood up anyway." A young resident approached nervously. "Ms. Moss, I just started here last month. I didn't know you personally, but everyone talks about you, about how you ran this ER, how you saved the place from falling apart. I wanted to ask, would you be willing to do a training session? Teach us some of what you know?" Lena looked at the eager faces around her. These were good people trying to do impossible work with limited resources and crushing pressure, just like she'd been. "I can't do a session here, but I'm opening a training facility. Advanced field medicine. If you're interested, come by. First session is free. She handed out cards with the facility's address. Then she walked to the elevator and wrote it to the administrative floor. The office that had belonged to Dr. Hale was empty now, being renovated. But the new chief of medicine was in the conference room, Dr. Lisa Park, 52 years old, 20 years of ER experience, reputation for being fair and competent. Park stood when Lena entered. "Miss Moss, thank you for coming. You asked to meet." "I did, because I owe you an apology." Park gestured to a chair. "I was part of the administrative staff that enabled Hale. I didn't know about his connection to Mercer, but I knew he was unstable. I knew he was making decisions based on ego rather than patient care, and I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my place to intervene, but that was cowardice." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to hear it, and because I want you to know we're changing. New policies, new oversight, new culture. We're rebuilding this hospital to be what it should have been when you worked here." Park pulled out a folder. "I also wanted to offer you this." Inside was a contract. Chief of Emergency Medicine. Salary that was triple what she'd made as a floor nurse. Full authority over staffing and protocols. Essentially, they were offering her control of the entire ER. "This is generous," Lena said, "but I'm not interested." "I figured, but I had to try." Park closed the folder. "The staff here needs to see that standing up for what's right gets rewarded. You were the best thing that ever happened to this hospital, and we drove you out. I wanted to at least offer you the chance to come back on your terms." My terms are that you take care of your people. The nurses, the residents, the techs. They're the ones who keep this place running. Don't let another Hale happen because you're afraid to challenge authority." "I won't. You have my word." Lena stood. "Then we're good." She left Redwood General for the last time. On the way out, she passed the ER entrance where she'd been fired 4 weeks ago. The memory felt distant now, like it had happened to someone else. In a way, it had. The woman who'd been fired was still trying to hide. The woman walking out now had nothing left to hide from. The opening day of the Advanced Field Medicine Center arrived cold and clear. Lena stood inside the first-floor training area, watching as students filed in. 37 people had registered for the inaugural session. Army medics, civilian paramedics, nurses from 3 different states, even 2 doctors who'd heard about the program and wanted to learn field trauma techniques. Dr. Wong and Lieutenant Green were setting up equipment. Webb, Reeves, and Kowalski were greeting students, checking credentials, making everyone feel welcome. The energy in the room was electric. People who'd come here to learn how to save lives, all gathered in one place, all ready to begin. Vance and Shaw arrived together, both in dress uniforms. They stood at the back of the room, observing, but not interfering. "You ready for this?" Shaw asked quietly. "No," Lena admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." At exactly 9 a.m., she walked to the front of the room. 37 pairs of eyes locked on her. She felt the old panic trying to surface, the fear of failure, the weight of expectation, the certainty that she'd freeze when it mattered most. Then she remembered Private Brennan's face, remembered Danny Patterson saying her name, remembered 500 people in South Sudan holding signs that said, "Thank you." She wasn't broken. She'd never been broken. She'd just been hiding. "My name is Lena Moss," she began. "Some of you know me as Nightingale. That was my call sign when I was a combat medic. It's not who I am anymore. But the skills I learned under that name, those are what I'm here to teach you." She paused, making eye contact with students around the room. "I'm not here to make you heroes. I'm here to give you tools, techniques, knowledge. What you do with those tools is up to you. But I'll tell you this, the difference between someone living and dying often comes down to one person showing up and refusing to quit. That person can be you. That person should be you. And by the time you leave this program, you'll know how to be that person." She pulled up a slide on the screen behind her. It showed a trauma scenario, multi-vehicle accident, multiple casualties, limited resources, classic triage situation. Let's start with the basics. You've got 6 patients, 3 critical, 2 serious, 1 minor. You have 2 other responders and 15 minutes before transport arrives. Who do you treat first and why? Hands went up. Students started debating, arguing, defending their choices. Lena listened, occasionally guiding the discussion, but mostly letting them work through the logic themselves. This was how you learned. Not by being told the answers, but by fighting for them. 3 hours later, they broke for lunch. Students clustered in small groups, still debating the morning's scenarios. Lena walked outside to get air and found Vance waiting. "You're a natural at this," he said. "I'm terrified." "Good. That means you care." Vance handed her an envelope. "This came for you this morning. Personal delivery." She opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated 2 days ago. "Ms. Moss, my name is Lieutenant Commander James Morrison, U.S. Navy. I'm a field surgeon deployed in the Mediterranean. Yesterday, one of our team members was critically wounded during an operation. We had minutes to stabilize him before medevac arrived. I used a technique I learned from studying your Yemen operation, the pressure angle hemostatic packing. It worked. The sailor is alive because you documented that technique, because someone studied it, because that knowledge reached me when I needed it most. I wanted you to know that what you're doing matters, not just for the people you save directly, but for everyone those people go on to teach. Knowledge spreads. Skills multiply. You're creating a legacy that will save lives for generations. Thank you for showing us what's possible. Lieutenant Commander Morrison." Lena read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. "You okay?" Vance asked. "Yeah, just realizing something." "What's that?" "That this is bigger than me. Bigger than any one person. I'm just the beginning. That's what leaders do. They start things that outlive them." The afternoon session went even better than the morning. Students were engaged, asking smart questions, pushing each other to think critically. Lena moved between groups, offering guidance, correcting mistakes, celebrating breakthroughs. By the end of the day, she was exhausted but exhilarated. As students filed out, several approached her with thanks. One woman, a paramedic from Baltimore, shook Lena's hand with tears in her eyes. "I've been doing this job for 15 years. I thought I knew everything. But today you showed me techniques that could have saved 3 patients I lost last year. Thank you for teaching us. Thank you for not giving up." After everyone left, Lena stood alone in the training area. Equipment was scattered everywhere, whiteboards covered in notes, the organized chaos of learning in progress. She walked to the window and looked out at Millbrook. Somewhere in this city, people were dying. Accidents, illnesses, violence, the endless stream of human fragility. But also, somewhere in this city, people were living because someone had shown up and refused to let them die. Because a medic or nurse or doctor had learned the skills, made the choice, done the work. That was the equation that mattered. Not the deaths you couldn't prevent, but the lives you could save. Her phone buzzed. Text from Volkov. "I see you found your calling. Good. The world needs more people like you. Less like me. Stay dangerous, Nightingale." Lena smiled and deleted the message. Another text arrived, this one from a number she'd never seen before. It contained only 3 words and a photo. "Because of you." The photo showed a little girl, maybe 6 years old, sitting in a hospital bed in what looked like South Sudan. She was holding a stuffed animal and smiling. The IV line in her arm was attached to a bag that Lena recognized, fluids mixed with Virathex. The girl was alive because of medication that had almost been destroyed, delivered by a chain of choices that started with one nurse refusing to walk away. Lena saved the photo. Then she called Shaw. "I need a favor." "Name it." "I want to set up a fund for patients who can't afford treatment, for medications that are too expensive, for people who fall through the cracks of the system. I'm going to call it the Ortiz Fund, and I want you to help me run it." That's not exactly my area of expertise. Neither is teaching, but we figure it out because it matters. Lena looked at the photo of the little girl. "I can't save everyone, but I can make sure the people I can save have what they need. Will you help me?" "Yeah, I'll help you." Over the next 6 months, the Advanced Field Medicine Center became exactly what Lena had envisioned. They trained 300 students in the first session, graduated 247. Every single one of them went back to their communities with skills they hadn't had before. Reports started coming in. A paramedic in Chicago used Lena's pressure techniques to save a stabbing victim. A nurse in Miami performed emergency field surgery during a hurricane. An Army medic in Germany taught her unit Lena's triage protocols and cut response time by 40%. The Ortiz Fund grew faster than Lena expected. Donations poured in from people whose lives she'd saved, from advocacy groups, from ordinary citizens who'd seen the story and wanted to help. Within 4 months, they'd funded medication for 2,000 patients who couldn't afford it. Within 6 months, that number hit 5,000. Senator Morrison's Ortiz Act passed Congress with bipartisan support. The pharmaceutical industry fought it, but public pressure was too strong. The law created independent oversight, mandatory transparency, and criminal penalties for suppressing life-saving medications. It wouldn't prevent all corruption, but it would make it harder. Mercer Pharmaceuticals ceased to exist. The company was liquidated, assets sold, executives prosecuted. 3 board members fled the country. The CEO was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Dr. Hale testified in 14 trials, and his testimony resulted in convictions every time. And Lena kept teaching. Every morning, she arrived at the facility before dawn, set up equipment, reviewed curriculum, prepared for the day's students. Every evening, she stayed late answering questions, working with students who needed extra help, documenting new techniques for future classes. Webb handled tactical coordination, teaching students how to operate in hostile environments. Reeves managed logistics, ensuring supply chains for field operations. Kowalski ran the medical simulation lab, creating scenarios that pushed students to their limits. Dr. Huang became Lena's closest collaborator. They published 3 papers together on field trauma techniques, presented at medical conferences, trained other instructors to expand the program, and slowly, Lena began to heal. Not from Danny's death, that wound would never fully close, but from the guilt of thinking she'd failed him, from the fear that she wasn't good enough, from the certainty that one mistake defined her entire career. She learned to forgive herself, to accept that she'd done her best with the tools she had, to understand that saving lives wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up and trying, even when you were terrified, even when the odds were impossible. 1 year after the program started, Vance called her into his office. He looked tired, but satisfied. "I have news," he said. "The Pentagon is expanding the program. They want to create satellite facilities in 6 other cities. They want you to oversee all of them. That's a lot of responsibility. You can handle it. You've proven that." Vance pulled out a folder. "There's also this." Inside was an official commendation from the Surgeon General of the United States. It praised Lena's contributions to field medicine, her innovations in trauma care, and her commitment to training the next generation of lifesavers. At the bottom was a personal note. "You are an inspiration to everyone in this field. Thank you for your service." "They want to name the entire program after you," Vance said. "The Moss Protocol for Advanced Trauma Medicine. It'll be taught at military medical schools, civilian training programs, hospitals worldwide. Your techniques will become standard procedure." Lena stared at the document. Her name, her techniques, spread across the entire medical system. It was more recognition than she'd ever imagined. "I don't want my name on it," she said. "Why not?" "Because this isn't about me. It's about everyone who's ever shown up when someone needed them. Every medic, every nurse, every first responder who does the work and doesn't get recognized. They're the ones who save lives every day. I just got famous for doing what they do." Vance smiled. "You really don't get it, do you?" "Get what?" "You're not famous for saving lives. People save lives every day and don't make headlines. You're famous because you stood up to a system that was wrong, because you risked everything to do what was right, because you showed people that one person can make a difference, even against impossible odds." Vance leaned back in his chair. "The Moss Protocol isn't just about medical techniques. It's about courage. It's about refusing to accept that the system is more important than the people it's supposed to serve. That's what you're teaching. That's what people need to learn." Lena thought about that, about Private Brennan and Danny Patterson and the little girl in South Sudan, about Dr. Ortiz and the Verithax and the whole chain of choices that had led to this moment. "Okay," she said, "but I want to add something." "What?" "A dedication. To everyone who's ever tried to do the right thing and paid the price. To the whistleblowers who got silenced. The medics who died in the field. The nurses who burned out trying to save everyone. This is for them. Not for me. I'll make sure it's included." That night, Lena stood on the roof of the training facility, looking out at the city. Below her, Millbrook sprawled in all directions. Lights in windows, cars on streets, the endless pulse of human life. Somewhere down there, people were being saved. People were dying. The balance shifted constantly, unpredictably, shaped by 1,000 invisible choices. Her phone buzzed. Text from Webb. New students arrive Monday, 53 this time. We're going to need more equipment. Another text from Reeves. Ortiz Fund just passed 10,000 patients. We're making a real difference. A third text from Kowalski. Just heard from a medic in Afghanistan. She used your arterial repair technique under fire. Soldier survived. Said to tell you thank you. Lena looked at the messages and felt something shift inside her. Not pride exactly. More like peace. The certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. She thought about Danny, about the promise she'd made at his funeral to never let another family go through what hers had. She couldn't keep that promise. People would always die. Families would always grieve. But she could make sure that when someone had a chance, when there was even the smallest possibility of survival, the people responding would have the skills to make it happen. That was enough. It had to be enough. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Is this Nightingale? The voice was young, male, shaking with emotion. This is Lena Moss. Who's calling? My name is David Brennan. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember. How are you? Good. Better than good. I'm healed up. Back to full duty. Brennan paused. But that's not why I'm calling. I wanted you to know I just got accepted to medical school. I'm going to become a doctor because of what you did for me, because of how you saved my life. I want to do the same for other people. I want to be like you. Lena's throat tightened. You don't have to be like me. You just have to be the best version of yourself. That's what my mom said. But she also said I should call you, to say thank you one more time, and to tell you that you changed my life, not just by saving it, but by showing me what's possible when you refuse to give up on someone. You're going to be a great doctor, David. I hope so. And when I am, when I'm out there saving lives, I'll remember that it started with you, that everything good that comes from my career traces back to the moment you decided I was worth saving. They talked for another 5 minutes. When Brennan hung up, Lena stood on the roof with tears streaming down her face. Not from sadness. From the overwhelming realization that this was what it meant to make a difference. Not grand gestures or heroic moments, just the quiet accumulation of lives saved, skills taught, choices made that rippled outward in ways you'd never fully see. She looked up at the sky. Stars were visible tonight, rare for the city. She found herself speaking to Danny, something she hadn't done in years. I think I finally get it. What you meant when you said I needed this work. It's not about being needed. It's about being part of something bigger than myself. About knowing that what I do matters, even in small ways, even when nobody's watching. The wind picked up, cold but not unpleasant. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, ambulances rushing to save someone, medics doing the work, the endless cycle continuing. Lena went back downstairs. The training facility was empty now, but it wouldn't be for long. Monday brought new students, new chances to teach, new opportunities to spread the skills that saved lives. She walked to her office, sat down at the desk where Danny's photo still waited. She'd added other photos over the months, Private Brennan in his hospital bed, the little girl from South Sudan, Dr. Ortiz receiving an award years before her death, a group shot of her first graduating class. These were her people. The ones she'd saved, the ones she'd taught, the ones who carried forward the work. She couldn't be in every emergency room, every battlefield, every crisis, but she could train the people who would be. She could give them tools and knowledge and confidence. She could show them that impossible situations sometimes had solutions if you were brave enough to look for them. Her computer chimed. Email from Senator Morrison's office. Subject line, Ortiz Act Anniversary Event. She opened it. They were planning a ceremony to mark 1 year since the legislation passed. They wanted Lena to speak, to tell her story, to inspire other people to stand up against corruption and injustice. She started to decline, then stopped. This wasn't about her ego. This was about showing people what was possible, about demonstrating that ordinary people could fight systems and win, about proving that courage mattered, that truth mattered, that lives mattered more than profit. She hit reply. I'll be there. Over the next month, she prepared her remarks. practiced in front of Webb, Reeves, and Kowalski, refined the message until it was exactly what needed to be said. The day of the ceremony arrived. Washington, D.C. in early spring, cherry blossoms blooming, the Capitol building gleaming white against blue sky. The event was held in the Senate chamber, packed with legislators, advocates, medical professionals, and journalists. Senator Morrison introduced her. 1 year ago, we passed legislation that fundamentally changed how pharmaceuticals are regulated in this country. That legislation exists because one person had the courage to expose corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, Lena Moss. Lena walked to the podium, looked out at hundreds of faces, cameras, recording devices. A year ago, she'd been fired from her job and considered invisible. Now she was speaking to the entire nation. She thought about running, about all the ways this could go wrong. Then she thought about Private Brennan, about the little girl in South Sudan, about the 10,000 patients funded by the Ortiz Fund, about Dr. Sarah Ortiz, who died trying to do exactly what Lena was doing now. She spoke. I'm not a hero. I want to make that clear from the start. I'm a nurse who saw something wrong and couldn't look away. That's not heroism. That's basic human decency. But somewhere along the way, we started treating basic human decency as exceptional. We started celebrating people for doing what everyone should do, stand up for what's right. She paused, letting that sink in. A year ago, I discovered that a pharmaceutical company was suppressing life-saving medication because it wasn't profitable. I broke laws to expose that. I worked with people I shouldn't have trusted. I made choices that put lives at risk. And I'd do it again. Because the alternative, watching people die when I had the power to help them, that wasn't acceptable. Around the room, people were leaning forward, cameras zoomed in. The Ortiz Act is important. It creates accountability. It protects whistleblowers. It makes it harder for corporations to put profit over people. But legislation alone won't fix the system. What fixes the system is people, individuals who decide that convenience isn't worth someone else's life, that following orders isn't an excuse for doing wrong, that small choices matter, even when nobody's watching. She looked directly at the cameras. If you're watching this and you've seen something wrong, in your workplace, your community, your industry, you have a choice. You can stay silent and hope someone else deals with it. Or you can speak up. And yes, speaking up has costs. You might lose your job. You might face retaliation. You might discover that doing the right thing is harder than you imagined. But I promise you this, the cost of silence is higher. The cost of silence is measured in lives that didn't have to end, in suffering that didn't have to happen, in injustice that didn't have to prevail. The room was completely silent. I'm a nurse. I save lives. That's my job. But every single person in this room has that job too. You save lives by speaking truth, by standing up to power, by refusing to accept that the way things are is the way things have to be. You save lives by being brave when it's easier to be quiet. That's not heroism. That's citizenship. That's humanity. She stepped back from the podium. The room erupted in applause. Standing ovation. Senator Morrison was crying. So were half the people in the audience. Lena walked off the stage feeling lighter than she had in years. She'd said what needed to be said. Whether anyone listened was out of her hands. Afterward, dozens of people approached her. Journalists wanting interviews. Advocates wanting partnerships. Medical students wanting advice. She answered what she could, deflected what she couldn't, and eventually escaped to a quiet corridor. Shaw found her there. That was incredible. That was terrifying. Same thing. Shaw handed her a bottle of water. You know this changes everything, right? You're not just a teacher anymore. You're a movement. I don't want to be a movement. I want to train medics. Too late. You started something bigger than that. Now you have to see it through. Lena drank the water, trying to process. She'd thought exposing Mercer would be the end. That she'd go back to teaching, rebuild her life quietly, fade into the background. But Shaw was right. This was just the beginning. The next 6 months proved it. Invitations poured in, speaking engagements, conference keynotes, consultations with governments and NGOs. The Moss Protocol was adopted by 14 countries. The Ortiz Fund expanded internationally. The training facility opened branches in Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Dallas. And through it all, Lena kept teaching. That was the core of everything. The classes, the students, the hands-on work of passing knowledge forward. She never lost sight of that. On the 2-year anniversary of her firing from Redwood General, she stood in front of her largest class yet, 93 students from 17 countries. They'd come to learn field trauma medicine, but they were getting something more, a philosophy of care that prioritized lives over protocols, courage over comfort, action over paralysis. Before we start today's session, Lena said, I want to tell you a story. 2 years ago, I was fired from my job for correcting a doctor's mistake. I thought my career was over. I thought I'd failed. But that failure led to everything that came after, the exposure of corruption, the legislation, this program, all of you sitting here right now. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the beginning of the best thing you'll ever do. She pulled up a slide, the first scenario they'd work through today. Complex trauma case, multiple complications, limited resources. The kind of situation where mistakes cost lives. Let's begin. The students dove in, arguing, debating, defending their choices. Lena guided them, challenged them, pushed them to think deeper. This was what she was built for. Not fame or recognition or awards. This, the work, the teaching, the endless process of turning knowledge into skill, skill into confidence, confidence into lives saved. After class, one student approached her. Young woman, maybe 25, with determined eyes. I'm from South Sudan, she said. My sister was one of the patients who received Virathex from the relief clinic. She's alive because of you, and now I'm here because I want to save lives like you saved hers. I want to go back to my country and teach these techniques to other medics. I want to build what you've built. Lena looked at this young woman and saw the future. Not her own future, but the future of everything she'd started. The ripples spreading outward, generation after generation, students becoming teachers, teachers training more students, the knowledge multiplying exponentially. What's your name? Lena asked. Amara. Amara, you're going to do great things. And when you do, when you're back in South Sudan saving lives, remember this. You don't need permission to make a difference. You just need courage and skills and the willingness to show up. Everything else figures itself out. Is that what you did? That's what I'm still doing. As students filed out, Webb appeared at the door. Boss, we've got a situation. Emergency call from a hospital in Millbrook. Mass casualty incident. They're requesting someone from our team to coordinate response. Lena grabbed her jacket. Let's go. They drove fast through the city, lights flashing. The hospital came into view. Redwood General, of course. It always came back to Redwood General. The place that had tried to erase her. The place she'd turned into a launching pad. The ER was controlled chaos. 30 patients from a building collapse, all needing immediate care. Dr. Lisa Park was coordinating, but she was overwhelmed. When she saw Lena, her face flooded with relief. Thank goodness, we need help. Where do you need me? Everywhere, but start with triage. We've got 3 criticals, and I'm not sure we have enough hands. Lena moved into the ER like she'd never left. Assessed patients, prioritized care, directed resources. Her training kicked in automatically. The cold clarity, the focus, the ability to see the whole system and identify where it was breaking down. One of the critical patients was a construction worker, crushed under debris, multiple internal injuries. The attending physician was young, clearly panicking. I don't know what to do, he admitted. I've never seen trauma this severe. You're going to be fine, Lena said. But you need to focus. Stabilize breathing first, then circulation, then worry about everything else. Walk me through what you're seeing. She coached him through it, calm, steady, exactly the way Vance had coached her years ago. The physician's hands stopped shaking. He started making decisions. Within 10 minutes, the patient was stabilized. You saved him, the physician said in awe. No, you saved him. I just reminded you what you already knew. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Patients were stabilized, transported, treated. No deaths. 3 people who absolutely should have died walked out of the ER hours later, battered but alive. And the medical staff who'd been overwhelmed at the start of the shift had found their rhythm, their confidence, their ability to handle crisis. As the last patient was wheeled to surgery, Dr. Park approached Lena. That was extraordinary. You just trained an entire staff in real-time crisis management. That's what I do. I know, and I want to thank you. Not just for today, but for everything. For showing us what this hospital could be. For proving that one person really can change everything. Park extended her hand. If you ever want to come back, even part-time, the position is yours. Lena shook her hand. I'm exactly where I need to be, but I'll come back for situations like this. When you need help, call me. That's what I'm here for. She left Redwood General one last time, walked out through the same doors where she'd been escorted out 2 years ago. But this time, she was walking out as someone different, not invisible, not diminished, but exactly who she'd always been, finally allowed to be seen. Shaw was waiting by the car. You can't help yourself, can you? What do you mean? You were supposed to consult. You ended up working a full shift. They needed help. They always need help. That's not going to change. I know, but maybe we can make sure they're better prepared for it. Maybe that's the whole point, not to solve every problem ourselves, but to teach other people how to solve problems, to spread the skills, the confidence, the knowledge, to make sure that when the next crisis comes, there are people ready to handle it. Shaw smiled. You sound like a teacher. I am a teacher. That's what I'm supposed to be. They drove back to the training facility in comfortable silence. When they arrived, Lena stood outside for a moment, looking up at the building. 2 years ago, this place didn't exist. Now it was training hundreds of people every month, spreading techniques that saved lives across the globe, creating a network of medical professionals who prioritized humanity over protocol. This was her legacy. Not the fame, not the awards, not the legislation. This building, these students, this work. She went inside. The evening class was already in session. Dr. Hong teaching advanced airway management, 30 students watching intently. Lena stood in the back, observing, making mental notes about ways to improve the curriculum. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown international number. I'm alive because of the medication you rescued. My daughter starts school next month. She gets to have a future. Thank you for being brave enough to fight for us. Attached was a photo. A woman and a little girl, both smiling, standing in front of a schoolhouse somewhere Lena didn't recognize. 2 lives, 2 futures, made possible by a chain of choices that started with refusing to walk away. Lena saved the photo, added it to the collection in her office. Then she turned off her phone and focused on the class. This was where she belonged. Not in the spotlight, not in the headlines, but here. Teaching, building, creating a future where more people had the skills to save lives, where systems served people instead of profit, where courage was normal instead of exceptional. The work would never be finished. There would always be more students to train, more techniques to develop, more lives to save. But that was okay. She wasn't looking for an ending. She was looking for a purpose, and she'd found it. As the class ended and students filed out, one of them paused at the door. Young man, army uniform, nervous energy. Ma'am, I just wanted to say, you're the reason I joined this program. I saw your speech at the Capitol about how everyone has a responsibility to stand up for what's right. And I realized that's what I want to do with my life. I want to be someone who shows up when it matters. What's your name? Daniel. Daniel Morrison. Lena smiled. You're going to do great things, Daniel. I can tell. How do you know? Because you're here. Because you chose this path. Because you decided that saving lives mattered more than anything else. That's all it takes. Daniel left. Lena stood alone in the empty training room, surrounded by equipment and possibilities. She thought about Danny one last time, about the promise she'd made at his grave, about the 3 years she'd spent trying to be invisible because she thought she'd failed him. But she hadn't failed. She just needed time to understand what success looked like. It wasn't perfection. It wasn't saving everyone. It was showing up every day and doing the work, knowing some people would live because you'd been there. That was enough. That had always been enough. Lena turned off the lights and locked the door. Tomorrow she'd be back. More students, more teaching, more chances to spread the skills that saved lives. The work would continue. The impact would multiply. The ripples would spread. And somewhere out there, someone she'd never meet would survive because of something she'd taught someone else. That connection, that invisible thread linking her choices to outcomes she'd never witness, was the real measure of a life well lived. She walked out into the night. The city sprawled around her, full of people living and dying and everything in between. She couldn't save them all, but she could make sure that when they needed help, someone would be ready. Someone would have the skills. Someone would show up. That was her purpose. That was her legacy. That was enough. Nightingale wasn't a person. It was an idea, and ideas couldn't be fired, couldn't be silenced, couldn't be stopped. They could only spread.